All right. Good evening, everybody. Good morning, Ratuja. I'm calling to order Tuesday, May 2nd, regular meeting. I will have our city clerk do our roll call.
Mayor Kelly Clark,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Amy Lamb,
Here.
Councilmember Karen Howe,
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen,
Present.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart,
Here.
Councilmember Ratuja Indapure,
Remote, but there in spirit.
Councilmember Osheen O'Farrell.
Here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Stewart, can you lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty, I'll read the land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. All right, first up, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
All right, great. Next up, I have public comment. Thank you. First, we have Paul Stickney.
Good evening, City Council. Paul Stickney, Sammamish. Tonight, going to talk about enrich, sustain, and stay. And the topic is going to be using 7 Ds to move Sammamish from better towards best. And this is about optimizing the a private-built environment, housing supplies, economic services, and transportation systems in order to alleviate imbalance in housing services and transportation over a cycle of life. And this is a standalone document. There could be a much deeper chat about all these Ds, but it's also in support of the 2 comments I sent in today, as well as lots of other material over time. The first 2 Ds are one section, and then the next 3, and then the next 2. The first 3 is get the data and then deliberate about the data. There are different ideologies, but inform them all with the same data. And then the next 3, what's the amount? What's the amount of, density that the community wants after going through the first 2? And then to what degree, at what phasing, at what speed? It depends on what we learn. And then the number 5D is, design. I think everybody in Sammamish likes things that look right, have a Sammamish style, character, and of the things that we add, make them sort of unique and complementary to the community. And the last 2 Ds are, distribution and delivery. Where? Town center, impervious surface in other centers, bonus parcels. But in my opinion, neighborhoods should get as little as possible unless they want some change. And if they don't, it should be up to us as a community to help them make any state changes less worse. A couple other topics. I assert that the issues here have never been about election. They're about direction. And that's the overarching D that spans all these other 7. Which direction do we go? We can't get that right unless we get the first 2 right, unless we get all the data and level set and then discuss consequences. I see Inslee's called a special session trying to work, bipartisan issues. Sammamish, we don't have that problem. We have tri-partisan issues. There are people who wanted way less growth than originally at King County. There are those who want almost none, and there are those that want optimal. We need to bring a tri-partisan perspective together to get the clear direction we want to go and improve the community from better into best. Appreciate the
you.
opportunity.
Thank you. Next up, is it pronounced Callan? Yes. Great.
Hello, my name is Callan DeWald, and I'm here to talk about the issues at Sammamish Landing Park. Since establishing the Sammamish Landing Park, the city has failed to properly manage the park to ensure it adheres to public works and safety standards, best management practices, and the valuable public land and open space is preserved and cared for. The city has failed to ensure the park operates in a manner that doesn't become an undue burden for the adjacent pre-existing residential neighbors. City official after city official has pointed to lack of resources. If this is true, the reality is that the city cannot afford to own and operate Sammamish Landing as a park. But if you speak to the officers themselves and you actually take the time to think about the issues and failures at Sammamish Landing, they have little to do with resources and much to do with accountability. To quote an officer I spoke with last summer, "We have the resources, they just don't give a shit." Every sign points to accountability, not to resources. After all, an officer who locks the parking lot 4 hours too late is still an officer locking the parking lot. An officer clearing the park after a 4th or 5th complaint returning time and time again in a given night, again, does not point to lack of resources. To the contrary, with accountability in place, it should only have taken one visit. Our public servants take cues from their leadership. As a third-generation public servant, I know this all too well. My husband, who has dedicated his career as a public servant, knows this as his truth as well. Our officers should take pride in our city. They should take pride in protecting and serving our communities and our beautiful public resources and amenities. When our officers instead condone misdemeanors and felonies in our public parks, encourage public nuisances, shattered bottles, drug use, destruction to public property, and our trees and vegetations in our sensitive shoreline jurisdictions, when our officers readily admit to retaliating against our Sammamish residents who complain or attempt to hold them to or their superiors accountable, when these actions not only become acceptable and go unchecked, but become the norm, it can only be the result of failed leadership and lack of accountability. Indeed, my husband and I have pleaded with city leadership, city managers, city council, mayors, chiefs of police, and city staff for years and years. Pleas that go ghosted, unanswered, and ignored. What message does this send to our police? That it's okay to ghost our residents, ignore them, leave them pleading for help. That these are our values and this is our culture. When two men can illegally park out in the open, unload firewood out of their truck bed, enter our public parks at all hours of the night, create bonfires on our public beaches, drive recklessly in our streets, jaywalk and trespass on neighboring properties, confront and accost adjacent homeowners, scream homophobic slurs and threats in public streets, and the response from our police is to give them permission to do so, shake their hands, and then ignore citizen complaints, requests for assistance, requests for police reports, and instead ask, what's the problem? The problem shouldn't need explanation. And yet the only response I received from numerous emails to city council and city staff is from a council member stating, "I can't really see anything strange going on in your videos aside from some yelling in one of them." Some yelling? Nothing strange? I leave you with the quote from the submitted video, the quote from the man who received a handshake from our police last night and sent him on his merry way unticketed and uncited shortly thereafter. "You're old and unhappy, and you're ugly, and you're sad, so go F yourself. And if you want to talk to an effing man, come down here and effing talk to me."
Thank you.
Effing homophobic slur. I'm a big man.
Thank you.
Who the F are you?
We'll move to the
If
next,
it's okay
please.
to say in my front yard to my home, it's okay to say here.
Right, your time is
I am a big
over
man. Who
of
the
3
F are you?
minutes.
Suck my effing DPB.
All right.
I'm going to go build my
Ma'am.
fire. You can do what the F
Ma'am.
you want. I talk to the police. Suck my effing balls.
All right, moving on. Casey? Again, I would like to remind everyone that you have a total of 3 minutes.
I shouldn't take the whole 3. The only reason we're here is because none of you will reply to our emails going on.
Could you please
a
identify
year.
yourself for the record, sir?
My name is Casey Peterson. I'm a resident at 4604 East Lake Sammamish Parkway, Northeast, adjacent to the Sammamish Landing Park. I moved to the city when I was 4 years old in 1989. I grew up here. I became an adult here. This place raised me, and 10 years ago, my wife and I jumped on an opportunity to buy our first home on East Lake Sammamish Parkway. The retirement home of an old Weber Point mill worker, William Quackenbush, had built our house in the 1930s, and the adjacent property was slowly subdivided and transferred to his children and their heirs over the decades until we came along. A young, naive couple with big dreams of a rundown old farmhouse. Over the last 10 years, we made it our home. In most cities, including the one I've called my employer since 2012, Bellevue, proximity to a public park is considered an asset to a property. Ask any real estate agent. That is largely dependent on the accepted social contract for any managing jurisdiction that the park is managed in some form. The park opens, the park closes. Crime is not permitted. The city is bound by its own code in many ways to mitigate the negative impacts of actively inviting the public to their property. This is where the city of Sammamish takes a drastically different tack from any of its regional partners. Do the problems with Sammamish Landing exist at Maidenbower Park, Chisholm, the Kirkland Strip, Juanita Beach, or the Sammamish State Park? What about Idlewood Park, a virtual clone of the landing on the same lake? The difference is standing in front of me.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Maupin. I'm the coordinator of the Issaquah Sammamish Interfaith Coalition, and I'm here because this is Affordable Housing Week. I thank you for taking this seriously. In our area, over the last couple of decades, our wealth gap has widened. Many people who are in market rate housing now are paying 50% or more of their income on housing. Some of the people in our area, quote, affordable housing, unquote, are actually paying 70% of their income on rent. Our state has done nothing on rent stabilization, and it may fall in the hands of municipalities to deal with this. It is so important that people be able to afford a roof overhead. During the pandemic, we became much more aware of how dependent we are on our essential workers, and most of them can't afford to live here. It's hard to pay for the gas to get here if you live at a great distance. So I commend to you all efforts you can make to see that housing that exists remains affordable for people, and that housing is created which is affordable for those who at moment can't afford it. Any of us could become ill, have a huge medical debt, and lose our housing. A divorce could send us to the streets. I spent time living in my car in East King County when I was escaping a difficult marriage. So it could happen to lots of us. Please be compassionate and do what you can. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think we'll move to online.
If you wish to provide public comment, please raise your hand. If calling by phone, please press *9. I see no public commenters, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have executive session pending litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101I. We're anticipating 15 minutes and no action afterwards. We expecting? So we'll be back at 7 p.m. Thank you. All right, welcome back. So next up, we have consent calendar. I will entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved. Second?
All right, any questions or comments on the consent calendar? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, so first we have Oh, it looks like we're doing the presentations first, right? With the chief.
Yeah, we are a little bit ahead of our schedule on the list.
We'll do some
So,
proclamations first,
I
or
just sent him a note, so
Okay.
maybe if we do the other two proclamations and we'll make sure that he's,
do I need to amend the agenda to move the proclamations first? Okay. Oh, wait, I see him.
here comes the chief.
Okay. We'll just wait so I don't have to speak. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everyone clap. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sprinting in. You are up.
Now? There we go. A couple weeks ago, my kids had spring break. We decided to head over to Chelan for a couple days. Rather than take our usual trek across Highway 2, however, we decided to take 90 since the family had yet to see my new office and meet Daddy's new buddies. Now, when you pile 5 kids and a puppy in the family van, you'd imagine it would be pretty loud. And it was. We drove along the scenic country backroads of Woodinville and Redmond toward our destination, but only my wife and I appeared to be invested in the view. When we finally reached the outskirts of Sammamish, I noticed the car quieted a bit. We rolled down the window, took in the fresh air as the sun filtered through the trees. We drove past parks and playgrounds, tidy shopping centers, and nice schools. My 15-year-old asked, "Dad, is this where you work?" I replied, "Yeah, buddy. What do you think?" He said, "It's so pretty. There's so much open space." In my experience, children, and adults for that matter, are often happiest when they're surrounded by the sights and sounds of nature. It has a calming effect, reduces anxiety, and inspires imagination. We also need safe and pleasing spaces to gather, work, and shop. Sammamish offers all those things in perfect balance, and that's truly rare. However, after 15 years of working in Sammamish, I'd started to overlook these aspects of our community. It took my own children's reaction to this special place to remind me of what we have here. And in this moment, with my family, I was reminded how fortunate I am to continue my work in service of this community. So once again, Council, I thank you for this opportunity to serve as your Chief of Police. And with that, I give you Sammamish Police Department 2023. Or not. Yeah, it's not working. There we go. This is the obligatory team photo we took at the all-city staff meeting about a month, maybe 6 weeks ago. You see about 2/3 of us represented there. The rest were on mandatory training or pre-approved vacation. And you'll notice it's also Maui Monday for our detective unit on the left there. But that's the team. Some fast facts about the Sammamish Police Department. We contract for police services with the King County Sheriff's Office. We are all King County Sheriff's deputies, and we work in close partnership with Woodinville PD and our unincorporated sheriff's deputies that are seated right upstairs. About our staffing, we patrol in 3 shifts: day shift 6 a.m. to 4 p.m., swing shift 2 p.m. to midnight, and graveyard 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. You'll notice 2 hours of overlap between day shift and swings, and 4 hours of overlap between swing shift and graveyard. We have 24 officers, including 2 funded SRO positions, 4 detectives, 5 patrol supervisors, and Detective Sergeant Christine Elias, 1 chief, howdy, and our executive assistant. Patrol operations, each deputy works a 10-hour shift 4 days a week on a rotating schedule. Deputies' duties include, but are not limited to 911 calls, performing area business and park checks, conducting traffic enforcement, and engaging with community groups. going backward? Oh, it's working. Criminal Investigations Unit, this is CIU. You'll see there Keith Gaffin, our detective on the left, Tracy Dodd, another detective in the middle, and our amazing Detective Sergeant Christine Elias on the right. They work a 410 schedule, 4 days a week. Keith works Monday through Thursday, Tracy works Tuesday through Friday. They conduct follow-up investigations on criminal cases, review all submitted incident reports from patrol to look for crime trends and patterns. They forward cases to the prosecutor's office. They apply for search warrants, warrants on homes, vehicles, persons, and businesses, and they engage in information sharing with other law enforcement agencies. I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. About us. Our true north, the Sammamish Police Department is committed to holding ourselves accountable, continuing to build lasting trust with the community members and elected officials we serve, and to preserving human dignity. We pledge to treat our community members with the empathy, compassion, and respect they deserve in every interaction. This is how we show up. Our values. This is how we conduct business. This is what drives our decision-making. Leadership. We are honest, respectful, effective, and humble. We have clear expectations. Our managers model expectations, and we lead by example from all levels. Integrity. We are open, transparent, accountable to the public we serve. We acknowledge that public trust matters all the time. Good faith, performance errors are addressed through training. Bad faith, criminal behavior or abuse of authority, and repeated or egregious acts are not tolerated. Service. We are timely in our response and seek every opportunity to have a positive impact on the people we serve. We are good stewards of taxpayer dollars, engage and collaborate, and strive to innovate. We focus on hotspot locations, high impact on repeat offenders, and visible presence when needed. And teamwork. We recognize that relevant training and effective communication increase public and officer safety. We fight crime constitutionally. Our managers coach, mentor, and develop a strong team culture. Our advanced training. We have received advanced training in implicit bias, de-escalation, autism awareness, Alzheimer's awareness, constitutional use of force, annually crisis intervention, and active bystandership for law enforcement. That's ABLE training you may have heard of, which is focused on the duty to intervene when a colleague conducts themselves outside the boundaries of our policies, code of ethics, or the law. We hold ourselves to the highest of standards and demand the same of those we serve in this profession. Calls for service. See the Ocean 1 there on top, Ocean 2 on the left, and the Ocean 3 district, which is largely Trossachs and Klahani on the right. 2022 calls for service, roughly 5,200 over a 5-year data set. It averages around 5,000 calls for service per year, down from 6,000 in 2017, and I kind of attribute that to alternative call handling, which is where you can call the 911 comm center and have a phone report taken. You can also go to reporttosheriff.org and do an online report. That is not my preference for anyone maybe listening. You could certainly do that, and it's appropriate for low-level crimes where, say, you're late for work and your car was prowled, but maybe nothing was taken, and you just want that to report that data, and we want that data. But when we do that, we miss an opportunity to engage with the community. We miss an opportunity to have an officer come out and talk to somebody, to give a face-to-face interaction, to look for evidence, to canvass for video, to fingerprint if appropriate. So that's something we're definitely missing with alternative call handling, but we obviously leave that to the discretion of the caller. If you have time for us, we want to come out and talk with you. We're going to look a little bit at the data. 2018 was when we kind of overhauled how we collect data for FBI standards, so it was all askew. So we started in 2019. And this is kind of just a basic overview. I'll get into it a little deeper here in a minute. But crimes against property, you'll see a spike. I can explain that, I assure you. The crimes against persons, I just want to illustrate that these are really, really low numbers. I've worked in jurisdictions where we collect this kind of data monthly. It's just not the case here. I've also, in doing this, looked at some of our neighboring jurisdictions. Our numbers are incredibly low by comparison. Crimes against persons. A little over 60, that's simple assault. Second, we're looking at no contact order and protection order violations. And third, intimidation offenses, that's going to be harassment. And the bulk of those top three are going to be DV related. Below that, and we're looking at less than 20 annually, sex offenses, aggravated assault, so your felony level assaults, and 1 homicide in 2022, none in 2021. Crimes against property. I'm going to break this down a little bit further on the next slide, but you'll see here this tremendous spike in 2020 for fraud. Now, that we contribute completely to the 1.6 million Washingtonians that had their identities stolen as a result of the unemployment application process. So we registered, I want to say it's 1,400 over a 2-year period, but really the spike of 1,000 in 2020. Below that, we have larceny, and that's, despite the spike, that's going to be your vehicle prowls, that's going to be your shoplifts, and just your random low-level thefts. And again, below that, we look at robberies, residential burglaries, auto theft, commercial burglaries. These are really, really low numbers, and yet the residential burglary numbers are the ones we're going to focus on because that's where it really has the most impact on how we live our lives. To break that down even a little further, the vandalisms, those are largely going to be graffiti related, right around 100 last year. The residential burglaries, you definitely see an uptick there from 2020, about 55 toward approaching 80. And see auto theft, bit of a rise. These are still really low numbers. Commercial burglaries, still really low numbers. Almost no robberies. So to get to the burglaries, we typically average around 60 a year. And I just want to give those numbers a little bit of context. A lot of them, and I can trace this back to some incidents we had in Klahani this last year. A residential burglary includes leaving your garage open and having somebody walk in and take a bike. We had a number of those. It's a different kind of crime, still qualifies as residential burglary. Somebody going in your garage, taking a power tool, which happens, but we had a ton of bike thefts out of garage. So I attribute some of the spike in those numbers to that kind of behavior. That's not necessarily a suspect going in your house. So the numbers are a little different there, but we did experience approximately 20 residential burglaries, largely in Trossachs, some in Klahani, and the vast majorities were a professional burglary crew. I'm comfortable saying that because it's actually made it out in the news. We haven't been advertising that fact because it's receiving a lot of attention nationwide. This crew's, it's operating everywhere for the last 3 years. We experienced about 20 here, and that was since Thanksgiving. This crew's actually been working between Kent and Bellingham for almost 3 years, and we've categorized 250 to 300 residential burglaries up and down the 405 corridor and the I-5 corridor that we can tie specifically to this crew. They are professionals. At present, they appear to have moved on from our region. Nonetheless, during this time, we have engaged in information sharing with all the agencies that are involved. Our detectives have weekly meetings to discuss what they're seeing. There are suspects. We know who some of them are. But really, it's by working together we've been able to, we think, quell this and figure out the tactics we're going to employ to get a handle on it. And I believe it's worked because we haven't registered one in quite a few weeks. They have a very unique MO, though, working in the evenings and through the weekend, which is not your typical burglary. Your typical burglary is Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. So these are very abnormal. It's just not something you see. This is not the norm. The one thing I will point out with these burglars, they do their work, they're diligent, they are professional, and they are not trying to go into an occupied home. They will surveil a target for well in advance to make sure when they go in to do their thing that they're not going to be confronted by a homeowner. So I say that because this uptick in burglary, I think we could give a little more context when we talk about the GeekWire article that named Sammamish the 13th safest city in the nation and the #1 safest city in Washington, because this data set that GeekWire used is based upon FBI statistics on violent crime, with the emphasis on violent. The crimes, the bulk of these crimes we're seeing are not violent, they are property crimes. And this is by no means to minimize the impact to one's sense of security when you are affected by a burglary. It's happened to me. My wife and I had our house burglarized a couple years ago. Like, I sympathize, I get how that feels. But these are non-violent, for the most part, crimes. And I think that context is important. I think people need to hear that. So what has our response been to, since the beginning, since November, when we started registering these, and it took a little while to figure out what we were seeing. But our response has been these: directed neighborhood patrols. You may have seen our helicopter flying over. That was a special request we put out. Wasn't sure if that was going to raise some alarms, but we know from speaking with other agencies that just being a huge visible presence during these peak burglary hours seemed to be beneficial. So we decided to do that. So we flew the helicopter over Trossachs and Klahanie during these peak hours in hopes that it had some effect. We've had APHIS, our fingerprint team, respond to some of these burglaries upon request. That throws a lot of powder around. Not everyone's up for that, but it's something that we offer to really get in the weeds and really try and find and collect some evidence. I mentioned the detectives participating in a regional burglary task force. We publish education pieces on the website. We're continuously, right now, updating our website with additional community member resources. We employ enhanced crime analysis, and we've been presenting routinely at Blockwatch and public safety meetings since this began. Our CEO is here, but I wasn't sure if he's going to drop in. Home security pro tips: secure and lock all your doors. I've seen this recently in checking some homes before I left Klahanie. I'd never seen this in 15 years, but people are pinning their gates shut. That's a fantastic idea. Before you leave, it's just another level of security, believe it or not. Trim your vegetation. That's our CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design protocols. We're happy to come out if you were to host a block watch and walk around your house with you and offer an analysis to see how you could better trim up the vegetation, where you might put your cameras, where you could enhance your lighting. We encourage you to start chats. I mean, just really get to know your neighbors, have these conversations, look out for each other when you're on vacation. I didn't put it there, but please avoid posting photos of valuables and that you're on vacation. You never know who's watching. If you're using a safe, and we learned this through these Trossachs burglaries, it doesn't matter how big it is, it doesn't matter how heavy it is. They were using 2 to 3 individuals to carry them out second-story windows. These are big safes full of things, loading them in garbage cans with wheels and rolling the garbage cans down trails. So affix your valuables, affix your safes to your walls, to your studs, like really make it difficult for these guys to get these safes out. It was remarkable, some of the things they were doing to get these valuables. Lastly, see something, say something. If it doesn't look right, trust your instincts. It's probably not right. Call us, we want to come out and look. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? It's fine, but if it's not, then we might have caught someone in the act or prevented a burglary. Our 2023 priorities: community engagement, mental health and crisis response, enhanced partnerships, and employee welfare. The Sammamish Police Department is committed to active community engagement. We've recently created a community engagement officer position for the purpose of forging new partnerships and opening lines of communication with community groups. Further, we are in the planning stages of establishing a community police academy in partnership with Woodinville PD and Unincorporated. This is a 10-week course designed to inform, gain community points of view, and establish two-way dialogue. I'm going to come back to the CEO in a minute. Community engagement, kind of glanced on this. The Academy, we're going to be updating our website with resources. Our CEO is currently writing an article, and we hope to contribute regular articles to the Sammamish newsletters. But basically what I'm saying is we're looking for any opportunity to engage. If there's something you're seeing that we're not, please bring it to our attention, because that's something we want to be a part of. Just know that we're always looking. The CEO, I just love saying it. Nate Griert, he was handpicked for this job because he's top notch, and his skill set is exactly tailored to this position. The duties of the CEO, I got ahead of myself. The mission of the CEO is to provide quality, professional law enforcement services tailored to individual communities to perpetually build public trust and improve safety. The primary objectives of the CEO are problem solving and community-oriented policing. The CEO also serves in a supporting role to the reactive patrol force of the precinct. I've already mentioned CPTED. His calendar is getting booked out, and it's fantastic to see. He's receiving requests 2 to 3 per day for community events. So that's exactly what we were hoping would come.
Can you define CPTED?
Yes, sorry. Crime prevention through environmental design, and that can be residential. Yeah, CEPT. I don't know if there's an
Yeah, I mean,
TED. Crime prevention through
now we
environmental
see it.
design.
Thank you.
And we have two programs. We have a commercial CPTED program and a residential CPTED program. He still supports schools. He's a former SRO, so he still maintains that dialogue with the schools. He provides CRACE training, which is civilian response to active shooter events. We hope to really ramp that up with our school partners. Stop the Bleed training, which is basic first aid for faculty and teachers. And he's in a Marine unit, so you'll find him on the boat routinely, but he's well-versed in water safety rescue and all those things that come with that. Mental health and crisis response. The Sammamish Police Department is committed to providing appropriate and effective support to vulnerable people experiencing a mental health crisis. We're currently analyzing 5 years of data to see where best to deploy our resources. I've been in conversations with Chief Ben Lane and the Core Connect coordinator, Jamie Formisano, to see kind of what an ILA, what program could we start up. We've already seen the benefits of that program in Woodinville. It's simply a staffing issue at this time. So we're in constant contact, and EFER and Core Connect are putting us through some advanced training here next week, I believe, and have invited us to a couple forums at the University of Washington to talk about mental health. So we're sending our CEO, our SRO from Lakeside, and Christine Elias will be attending as well to make sure. We really want a local mental health cadre here at the precinct. So we know what training's available, and we know kind of how to tailor anything that we do to the needs of Sammamish. Enhanced partnerships. The Sammamish Police Department is committed to enhancing partnerships with city departments to ensure system resiliency in emergency management planning and response coordination. That's a lot of words to say that we want to make sure that the protocols and training and resources of the King County Sheriff's Office are best customized and tailored to our needs here in the city. So we've already allocated one of our bodies to an ancillary job. Derek Jones is half the time on a bike. He's also our emergency management coordinator for the city. So we're really excited to see how we can best partner with schools, city departments, and other organizations moving forward. Employee welfare. The Sammamish Police Department is committed to positively impacting employee welfare. Our officers give a lot of themselves to this profession, and we want to see that when they do leave, that they leave as whole people. So we're looking at mental health and physical health options to just make sure that we're taking care of our people here at the city. We foster leadership development for all PD personnel. I'm in a lot of advanced training this year in leadership, and I'm making sure that our leadership team gets the same. So we've reached out for some grants. We've been given some grant money, and I'm using that to build up our master patrol officer level, the mid-level supervisors on patrol, as well as our patrol supervisors. So everyone is receiving advanced leadership development training. And I'm conducting surveys. I do exit interviews. I absolutely do exit interviews, but I'm also doing interviews with people to see why are they still here? Why do they enjoy Sammamish? What is it about this work site that sets us apart, and where can we do better? So I've had some really positive feedback from that, and it's been beneficial. And we've already been able to put some real change in motion. So it's a really good recruiting and retention tool. Community event partnerships. All the things that we do, the National Night Out, the Lunar New Year, 4th of July, Rigapalooza, the Torch, Special Olympics, Torch Run and Polar Plunge, Extravaganza, Coffee with the Community, which I've done, which is a fantastic time. Presentations to community groups and schools, and any other event we can get invited to. We want to be there. We have a robust Explorer program. That is not entirely our group. We partner closely with Maple Valley and Burien to make sure that we have, given a large community event, that we're able to support each other. But it's leadership through the law enforcement lens. Traffic enforcement. You may have seen our motors unit out there. We now have 3. We actually have a supervisor for our motors unit now as well. They conduct traffic enforcement all over the city, to include the school zones. They respond to traffic and parking complaints. They investigate collisions. Patrol also investigates collisions. and they back patrol when needed, sorry. And finally, some of the benefits of contracting with King County. We have access to Guardian 1 and Guardian 2, our helicopters. We have a recently launched, and I just found this out tonight, we have a drone program now, which we only use really for critical incidents, but Nate, our CEO, as part of the Marine unit, now has a drone. He just received it, so we now have that resource here in the city at no additional expense, and that's awesome. I would love to see us be able to expand that for tactical situations or emergency management out on the water. We have access to the SWAT team. There's kind of barricaded subjects. We actually have a bunch of guys within Sammamish PD ranks that are on the SWAT team. They serve high-risk search warrants. You may have seen our K9 units training around here, both bomb and tracking dogs. We have access to BDU, our bomb disposal unit. They join us every time we have a bomb threat at a school. CNT, our crisis negotiators. We have a couple on staff here as well. And our specialty units, as needed. We have very, very capable detectives, and they take everything that we throw at them. But on occasion, if it's too big of a case and it requires a whole lot of eyes and hands, Major Crimes is going to step in. So will the Special Assault Unit. We have our Major Accident Response and Reconstruction Program. They're going to come out on any collision that involves serious bodily injury or death. The Advanced Training Unit, which gives us all of our annual training. The Civil Unit. Warrants unit, and we pretty much have our own dedicated Marine unit. We have our own boat, and we have 3 officers on staff that are Marine rescue certified. And that's what I have for you.
Can I
Can
do
I answer some questions?
Can I do a boat ride along?
We were talking about that this evening. I think it's an important component to have the council know exactly what we're capable of doing, what our resources look like, and so we are actually setting something up. I would anticipate it'll be a weekend, but that's not set in stone either.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Howe.
Thank you, Chief. That was a very helpful update. I do have a couple of questions.
Yes.
I'll start first with fentanyl and the ability for the policing staff to be a part of say, a town hall or some kind of opportunity where we can get in front of the public and do basically an informational, educational type of evening. It doesn't have to be a big deal, something we could actually do at the library or here and work in concert with the DEA. I understand the Kiwanis group actually did that fairly recently. It was well attended, but that, it's only 40 people.
Yeah.
So, my idea is that we televise it and just do a bigger deal because there's a lot going on with fentanyl in specific. I work with a lot of folks who have a substance use disorder. And for them, fentanyl is their drug of choice. And unfortunately, I've heard that in high school that is also a drug of choice because it's so cheap. It's $3-4, right, for a pill. But the high is quick and it's over and then you need another one. So I think that there's a lot of information that we could give, not just, kids, but parents and members of the community. And I would look to you for your assistance in something like that. Is that something that your CEO would be instrumental in putting together, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And he's actually doing this pretty routinely now, not televised. We're actually setting up one here in the next week or two for about 30 or 40 families. So it's kind of been as needed. But both he and Matt Martin have given these talks routinely since 2019, to really anyone that's willing to listen. So absolutely, we will do this.
And there's a lot that we're learning too about this particular drug and just what's been happening in terms of even methadone treatment, for example. Just getting current information that gets to a broader audience that's amplified so that everyone's hearing the same information at the same time so it doesn't get out of alignment or misunderstood, because it's easily misunderstood.
It is.
So that would be something that I would be looking to try to help. I would have.
We would love to participate in this.
On that one. Another question that's not related, but SROs. Can you give me the status of SROs in Sammamish? Is it a service that the schools have asked for or not asked for? Where is that?
It's a delicate conversation at this time. I will offer that Nate Griert, our CEO, was previously the Skyline SRO. And part of creating this position was to rebuild that relationship and maintain that moving forward. That's certainly within his skill set. And As far as the other SRO position, I can say that we were initially told that it wasn't going to look like it was going to happen, but we have yet another meeting here in the next week or two because I feel like there's more information that's about to be forthcoming. I am hopeful that we don't end that partnership. They're talking about layers of security. I don't know exactly what that means, but I know whatever it is, we want to be a part of it. We cannot lose that relationship. Whatever it is, I mean, if we no longer have SROs, and I'm not saying that's the case, but if we don't, certainly they won't be on campus day to day, but we will still be there as we would with any other school in Sammamish, providing these trainings, talking to faculty, providing fentanyl training, CRACE, Stop the Bleed. These are all things we're willing to provide to any school if they're willing to have us.
If I could follow up on the CRACE thing for a second, and thank you. I understand it's an issue that's not entirely resolved. What I have heard from the schools is that their funding has been cut for active shooter types of training. Have you heard that as well?
I had not heard that, but I'm getting really good at looking for grants.
Okay. Well, if you are able to, do that training or some of it, I believe the schools would actually be very interested in that. This is a topic that came up out of the Emergency Management Advisory Board that I attend, and it was the group there specifically represented the educational departments of the Seattle School District, and I was very surprised to hear that that was just training that they just had a hard time getting access to. So it just occurred to me that that could be an issue even for our schools here. So I'm not clear on that, but it's great to hear that you actually have a program that enables that.
And we received a follow-up email from the Issaquah School District here on Friday asking for another meet. I don't know what the topics will be, but I know what I will be requesting.
And my last question, because I'll give the time over to others, has to do with staffing. So I thought you were down 3 people. Are you down 3 people, or are you fully staffed?
We do carry vacancies. One of them being our narcotics detective. That spot is not filled at this moment, largely because the entire narcotics team that previously existed here out of Precinct 2 folded. The only 2 teams that remain are in Shoreline, and they're half a team. That's 2 individuals. And there's a rather robust one out of Precinct 4, where the team I used to be on. Those are the only narcotics teams in the sheriff's office presently. And so we hold that vacancy. We do have a couple patrol vacancies, but we augment that with overtime. So it's not that we're ever running below staffing. They just won't be necessarily our dedicated Sammamish police officers. So it might be a Woodinville officer, it might be a Burien officer, one of our partners that is able to fill in for that night.
So you could have officers that aren't terribly familiar with Sammamish here, for example, rotating through just depending on where the vacancy might be?
That's a great question, and that had occurred to me, and what I've noted is that the people that choose to work at this work site have either previously worked here or feel comfortable working here. We're kind of out of the way. It's when you work 12 hours or whatever in Burien, it's easy because they have the need to just keep working 4 to 6 more hours in Burien. The people that come here, like the people that work here, know the area, and so we find that the people working overtime here were previously on our staff, are familiar with the territory, and know the city. I don't know if that answers your questions, but they are familiar, I seem to find.
Okay, thank you very much.
I was just going to note for the chief that your CEO is standing in the back of the room if you want to introduce him.
Yes. When my phone rang, I just ran out. I didn't alert him that we were starting. Nate Greyer, Detective Nate Greyer. We're just so pleased to have him on staff here. This job was made for him. Everything that he does, the way he communicates, the way he engages with the city, he is exactly the person you want in this role. And I think he's now a month in.
Yeah.
So, Detective Nate Greyer.
Hello. Nice to meet you, Roy.
Mayor, if I may, Councilmember O'Farrell and I had a chance to go down and see the Marine unit train last fall. And so I would recommend anyone, if we can get that set up, anyone that can go down and take a look at that. Is pretty impressive what they're able to do. And Nate is kind of at the forefront of that for Sammamish.
Thank you. Yeah.
Is Nate on days then?
He is.
Awesome. Councilmember Indapure?
Thank you. I know the chief has offered me a preview or at least a ride around their motorcycle track as well. So I'm looking forward to that in June or July. So thank you, Chief. And great to get this report. I think we all have been really waiting since you joined us. I have two questions. One is around, you said you are a big part of community events. I want to know where are the places that you're not getting invited to, and what can we do as a community to make sure you're invited there? I know Councilmember Howe touched on the opioid crisis. I think we didn't see much in the presentation, so if you could touch a little bit more on that, on what trends you're seeing in the city right now, I think that would be very helpful. And then you had something on emergency management, and I don't know if it's a question for you or for Scott or for our council members around the EFA board. I just wanted to see, are there any synergies? Do we share resources? Is there an overlap on the emergency management plans? Thank you.
I guess as far as emergency management, I mean, we have the complete resources of the King County Sheriff's Office at our disposal. In the event that we were to have some sort of critical incident, we're working incredibly hard with building our relationship with EFR. I would love to see some tabletop exercises and some drills so we could practice in the event, whatever that emergency may be, but that we know how to work together and communicate during those events. So I feel confident in the equipment and the people. As far as practical application of it, we definitely need to work on that. I'm not sure that
Chief,
entirely
I'm
answers your
happy to
question.
jump in as well. Councilmember, I appreciate the question, and I would say we are communicating across all of our, all the partners, including the chief mentioned the school districts, all the schools in town we're reaching out to them and making sure that we're at the table to talk about both their emergencies and our emergencies and how do we react and respond in those moments. We also, as you know, we have contracted with Eastside Fire and Rescue for regional emergency management services, and so we are working collectively with them. And then the chief has been kind enough to designate one of his officers who has a real affinity for emergency management to be on our internal team, if you will, to make sure that we have coordination across and communication across all of as we go through planning and we are building our, excuse me, our update of our emergency management plan, that we have really good input from our partners so that we have a clear line of communication as we have emergency management, both as an exercise and then if we ever have to put it into practice.
And Councilmember Nabore, to your second question, I believe, you asked about crime trends. We are seeing just a slight uptick across just about every category, but these are really, really small numbers, even though they are slightly trending upward. The biggest, most impactful one has been the burglary series that occurred in Trossachs and Klahanie, and those appear as of last month to have tapered off. So I'm very comfortable with these numbers. I don't want to see them increasing further, but these are incredibly low numbers by comparison to our neighboring jurisdictions and other work sites that where I've been employed. Could you repeat?
I think my question was specific to the opioid crisis. I mean, I know we've had multiple cases. Again, there have been reports and a lot of coverage on the fentanyl deaths that we've had in the city, and again, just overall opioid crisis. So I just was wondering if you're seeing any trends in that particular regard.
I don't know about trends, and I might not be the right person to speak about this. I am not seeing any trends, but I have not specifically reached out for that. And I'm happy to do so and report back to you.
Great, thank you.
It does appear to be a somewhat pervasive problem throughout every community and every walk of life. So what we're not seeing are reports of dealers operating within an area like we see other jurisdictions. At least I've received no reports of people dealing fentanyl within our city.
That's a little reassuring to hear, because I think the last time we heard, it was a homeowner and who a small child died because of that, and they apparently were dealing from within Sammamish. So that is good to hear.
Yeah.
And I think just sort of keeping the community informed on this particular topic would really be very helpful.
And we do hope to employ and put some resources out on our website, just really, and any way we can engage on this particular topic and kind of take the stigma away from the opioid dependency. And there's a lot of prongs to doing that, but education, I think, for me is paramount. So you're going to see, as we build out our website, a lot more resources offered on this particular topic.
And her last question was if there's any communities or areas that you're not getting an invite to?
No, not as such. And I think that's, I guess the point I would like to drive home is that if you see something where an event where we're not represented, either please let me know. If we drop the ball, I need to know that. If we weren't aware of it, we'd like to be invited next time. It doesn't matter what it is. We want to come to the farmers markets. We want to come to the Holy Festival. We want to do, and I've attended many of those myself. They're a lot of fun. And if that opportunity exists and you don't see us, please point it out. Don't hesitate to point it out.
Deputy Mayor Lamb?
Thanks, Chief, for the presentation. It was really great to see the data on crime statistics. I know we had spoken earlier in the year during our council retreat about having some sort of dashboard. Is there still plans to implement one on our city website showing a police blotter and whether it's weekly crimes or monthly even? Something to keep our residents updated?
I don't have anything specific as of yet, but I do have a meeting with our new communications director on Friday, and this will be a topic. For me, it's not necessarily the data. I own the data. I want to make sure I present it in a manner that doesn't cause alarm, and that can be very tricky.
Okay.
So it's on my mind, and I'm looking for input on that.
Yeah, that would be great because other cities have one. Issaquah has one, and I think it's information that a lot of our residents are hungry to have.
I actually looked at all of their websites while I was crafting mine to see what their data looked like by comparison, so I take your point.
Okay. Another question is, I'm interested in doing a gun buyback. I don't know if that has been a topic of discussion. Federal Way in Burien has had one, and Kirkland had one, and it was so successful that they ended up having 3 in 2022. I think it'd be a great opportunity for our residents to get rid of unwanted guns. Is that something that can be considered?
Absolutely. I had not, but I see those chiefs routinely, Burien and I think it was Kirkland. What was the other jurisdiction?
Federal Way.
Federal Way. I see all of them routinely, so if that's something we decide to do, I'm sure I can figure out how to do it in short order.
Okay. A lot of these programs offer gift cards. I don't know where the funds would come from, but that's probably something we could work out.
These chiefs mentioned that there's donors out there would like to see these occur more frequently, so I'll explore that as well.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
He sounds like the money finder.
It's like a treasure hunt. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Council, do we have any other questions? I know we did mention that perhaps this is not the last time we'll see you, maybe an annual or every week. Just kidding. I don't know what kind of cadence, but I think if we had any other questions. Oh, Councilmember Napure?
Just one quick question. Yeah, I think I know we did, I think, Chief, you mentioned mental health briefly. I know that is also a topic that we care about deeply in Sammamish. And I know that during the pandemic, probably there was a lot of distress sort of in the community. Again, I think you've mentioned training for all your officers. I just wanted to understand, is that helping? Is that helping you? Is that helping the community? And are you seeing any different trends around that as well?
I would say post-pandemic, we certainly see, especially in some of the DV-related statistics, that's where we're seeing the increases, just people frustrated, and it's definitely represented in the numbers. We're at the very early conversations of what something like a Sammamish PD mental health cadre could look like. We have the right people in place to do the work. They are signed up for training and they will be attending it here soon. I've reached out to the radar program in Shoreline, which is in a bit of a flux. They're rebranding as Racer and working more closely with Kirkland. And I think one component is they might be removing law enforcement from that co-responder model. But these are all rapidly evolving kind of relationships. We just want to be a part of it. So I previously worked in radar. In fact, I worked on the first iteration of radar in 2014 in Shoreline. I see its potential. I'm a big believer in radar, Racer.
Chief, if you may, would you describe what either radar or Racer is for those that don't know?
It's a co-responder model that, whereas Core Connect here in EFR is a mental health professional and a firefighter, Racer is a police officer. Radar has a navigator, that's the mental health professional, that goes out with the police officer pretty routinely. It's a 40-hour-a-week job now. It was just 1 day a week when I worked there, but they do referral-based. So if we find that through dispatch calls for service, if someone is calling 911 constantly in need of help or resources, that now the radar navigator and the radar officer will circle back with them weekly or more frequently as needed to see where that breakdown is occurring and what resources can we get them. I'm a big believer in that program. So I'm trying to, and I've seen it in action and I've seen the benefits. Core Connect, I believe, has a much more broad scope of work. And I believe in that program as well. Jamie Formisano has been fantastic with telling me like how we could participate in that. And we've had some really good discussions, but they simply don't have the bandwidth yet to take us on. So again, I've talked with Chief Lane about this. We are ready to roll. Financing will be an issue, but Jamie has agreed to take some referrals on a case-by-case basis, specifically as it relates to schools, to kind of start establishing that relationship. We have an open dialogue, which is awesome. And by 2024, we're almost halfway there, they hope to have one additional co-responder team that perhaps we could partner with. So I like the direction things are moving.
Thank you.
All righty. So I know, Scott, I don't know if you want to mention if we want to try and do this again at some point, or...
Yeah, we'll invite the chief back for sure to give some updates. In the meantime, I know that I think our CEO is going to, we'll have an article in not this newsletter that comes out this week, but the one that comes out next. And we'll do some regular articles on as we move forward. So we'll be ramping up that communication component as well.
And for council, I think if we have any other questions, we can send them to Scott. Probably can field them on. Does that sound good?
Please do.
Yeah, great. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good evening. So I think David Pyle, we are ready for an update from you.
That's on now. Great. Good evening, Mayor Clark, City Council, David Pyle, Community Development. I'm here tonight to provide you with your 6 monthly update on major planning projects. Over the next few months, there will continue to be many meetings on the Comprehensive Plan, the Climate Action Plan, and the Housing Action Plan. I've listed the scheduled meetings here through the end of June, although there could be meetings added or changed as we continue our efforts on these planning projects. Keep in mind there is a lot of background work you don't see here. Staff have been very busy keeping these projects on track. For the comprehensive plan, we are ramping up outreach events with the spring weather. These will continue into the summer and fall. We are working to evaluate how recent state legislation affects our work plan and update process. There's a lot to digest there. We also continue to work on housing and land use strategies and are starting work on the new economic development element. We're also setting up meetings with the city's service providers. Here you see upcoming meetings and events related to the comprehensive plan through the end of June. For the Climate Action Plan, our focus is on refinement of greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled reduction strategies, initiation of the Community Advisory Group, which will hold its second meeting tomorrow on May 3rd, review of neighboring cities' plans, and beginning work on development of the community module of the plan. While we are on this slide, I wanted to make sure we remind everyone watching that the City Council approved the community baseline and profile and GHG VMT reduction strategies are due to the Department of Commerce in June of 2023. Here you see upcoming meetings associated with the Climate Action Plan through the end of June. For the Housing Action Plan, also known as the Housing Diversification Toolkit, our current focus is on City Council review after the public hearing was held by the Planning Commission in April. While we were on this slide, I wanted to make sure we remind everyone watching that the final adopted Housing Action Plan is due to the Department of Commerce in June of 2023. Once approved by the city, staff will switch gears to transmit the adopted document to Commerce and work on integrating it into the comprehensive plan update process, where additional work will continue on the topic of housing as part of the comprehensive plan update. Here you see the two upcoming meetings related to the Housing Action Plan, also known as the Housing Diversification Toolkit, which is scheduled for presentation to the City Council next week on May 9, followed by a City Council public hearing and potential adoption on June 6th. And finally, I wanted to alert the audience to a new project you will start to be seeing updates on soon, the Critical Areas Update. This project is in the process of being launched, and we are finalizing our contract for consultant services. There will be more on this later. That's it for now. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Don't leave us so soon, David. Councilmember Howe.
Hi, David. Thank you. Are all of your meetings posted somewhere so that people have access? Because I did see one note that somebody was trying to find the Climate Action Group and was having trouble finding the actual date and time.
Yeah, so the Community Advisory Group
Thank you.
meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are posted through the Community Advisory Group portion of the Climate Action Plan website.
So not necessarily on the calendar.
Well, there are so many meetings sometimes that which ones do you post to the calendar and which ones do you not?
Okay.
So we tend to post true public meetings to the calendar.
Gotcha.
However, the Community Advisory Group is not in true form a public meeting because there is no public comment being taken. It really is something that the community has opportunity to observe. And if they want to provide comment to the group, there's an email address that they can route to comments to Community Advisory Group members. There is no 3-minute period for public comment at those meetings.
Okay. Do they hold them here?
They're held virtually via Zoom.
Okay. But they're also recorded.
They are recorded, and the recordings are also posted to the Community Advisory Group portion of the Climate Action Plan website.
Very helpful. Thank you.
All right, Council, any other questions for David? You're done early tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, David. See you soon. All righty, proclamations are up next. So Councilmember O'Farrell, if you'll do our Affordable Housing Week.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Affordable Housing Week, May 7th through the 13th, 2023. Whereas all people should have access to safe, healthy and affordable homes within the communities that provide opportunity, and whereas the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development defines affordable housing as housing on which the occupant is paying no more than 30% of gross income for housing costs, including utilities. And whereas studies have found that each $100 increase in median rent results in a 15% increase in homelessness in metro areas and a 39% increase in homelessness in nearby suburbs and rural areas. And whereas in Washington state, there are only 29 affordable homes for every 100 low-income renter households, And whereas Washington residents would need to earn $30.46 an hour on average to afford a 2-bedroom rental home, and whereas Washington has the 6th highest housing cost in the country, and whereas everybody benefits from affordable housing, including the people who reside in these properties, their neighbours, businesses, employers, and the community as a whole, and whereas the need for affordable homes across King County prior to the COVID-19 pandemic and the number of people experiencing homelessness has remained at crisis level, and whereas united to raise public awareness, people, organisations and communities in King County are participating in local Affordable Housing Week activities to elevate the critical need to create healthy communities with ample affordable housing, and whereas the City of Sammamish endorses the goals, objectives and purposes of Affordable Housing Week, and in doing so firmly recommits itself to ensuring that our community's recovery from the crisis at hand is equitable and that all people in Sammamish live with dignity in safe, healthy and affordable homes. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Sammamish does hereby proclaim the week of May 7 through 13, 2023 as Affordable Housing Week.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Treen, National Police Week.
Yeah, this Sammamish, Washington proclamation is for National Police Week, which is May 14th through the 20th, 2023. Whereas there are more than 800,000 sworn law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the Sammamish Police Department. Whereas since the first recorded death in 1786, more than 23,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and been killed in the line of duty. And whereas there are 23,785 names of these dedicated public servants engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C., and whereas in 2023 the names of 556 officers killed in the line of duty were added to the memorial. And whereas these 556 officers include 224 officers who were killed during 2022, with an additional 332 officers dying in the previous years before 2022. And whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's 35th Candlelight Vigil on Saturday, May 13th, 2023. And whereas May 15th is designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all fallen officers and their families, and the U.S. flag should be flown at half-mast. Therefore, be it resolved that the Sammamish City Council observe May 14th through the 20th, 2023 as National Police Week in the City of Sammamish, and publicly salutes the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. All right, now we are moving to new business. So first up, we have our first quarter 2023 financial update with Aaron.
Good evening, Council. So we have a brief update for the first quarter of 2023. So we're going to go ahead and go through that. I'm going to try to use the clicker as well. See if that. It's our second attempt. It's a. Down. We'll see if that translates. I don't know. Okay, so first question is, why do we do a budget monitoring report? So the Finance Department does these budget monitoring reports as part of best practice. So first off, measurable and timely results are a good thing to have. So part of that effort is doing a regular budget monitoring report, and we do that monthly. We also publish to the website quarterly. So it's there for current period as well as previous periods. It's also part of financial sustainability goals that we have to be able to monitor trends. So any trends that are developing will first appear in those budget monitoring reports. And so that's what we're putting those reports together to try to track. A third purpose of the budget monitoring report is there is an element of state law that requires quarterly budget monitoring. And so as part of that requirement, there is a quarterly piece that's included as part of the financial management reports that's done quarterly. The requirement here really can be boiled down to a one page, so it's a very high level requirement for monitoring. You'll notice all of our budget monitoring reports are much more than one page. So we provide a lot more data behind our monitoring reports because we're looking for those trend information, we're looking at all of those anomalies, we're trying to project forward to see how we're doing, as well as just our progress and using it as a management tool as we go through the year. So what's the overall timeline related to budget monitoring? So you can see that back in November, we adopted the 23-24 city budget. So that was put into place in November of 2022 for 23-24 budget period. It's a biennial period for the city. So it's a 2-year period, and we are in our first quarter of 2023. So that's what our first quarter monitoring report is covering. Those quarterly reports are going to continue all the way through 2023. So that's the graphic on the side there is just a reminder that quarterly you're going to see these things update. The website will be updated as we pass each of these quarterly periods throughout the year. That's going to happen for all of 2023. That's also going to happen in 2024 because we have a 2-year period of a budget. So those quarterly updates will happen so you get 4 quarters. So coming up, we're at the end of May, so just a reminder on where the budget information flows here internally. We have year-end financial statements are due to the state auditor. This is for the 2022 fiscal year-end close. So that information is required to be sent to the state auditor's department by the end of May. So that's going to happen internally. And then in June, next month already, we're going to be coming back and talking about the operating forecast. So the 6-year operating forecast that was put together as part of the budget document. We're going to come back and we'll be doing a overview of that with council that's looking at the 2023 through 2028, so the future forecast period. And so we'll look at updates to those. We'll also at that time be looking at any budget carry forwards from 2022, which is the budget period that just closed, into the 23-24 budget period. So that's the current budget period. So prior budget period to current budget period. So then on June 20th, after we've reviewed those carry forward requests from departments as those come through and are requested, then on June 20th, we potentially would adopt a budget carry forward ordinance to allow those budget amounts to carry from 2022 into the 23-24 period. Then moving on through the timeline, July and August is the internal review of the department budget request as part of the budget mid-buy that's referred to. And then in September, the city manager would review those mid-buy budget modification requests. And that flows into October where there would be a city council review of that, any city manager adjustments. And then in November is when you would do the public hearing process as well as the property tax ordinance for 2024, the second year of the budget. So again, a deadline there, just as a reminder, November 30th is the King County deadline for the King County Assessor's Office to receive any 2024 property tax ordinance action. So when we talk about budget monitoring reports, there's really 3 layers of depth to it. There's tonight's just overview on the general budget monitoring, what do we do it for? A second layer of information is the 4-page summary that was included in the agenda bill packet. It just summarizes, here's what we're seeing through the first quarter. Then there's for those that really like the detail, and me and Chris really do. So Chris Giannini, Deputy Finance Director, is here with us tonight. We're looking through at the line item level. So budget actual variance activity down to the line item, account line item level. That's all contained in these financial management reports. And we do those monthly and we post them on the city website quarterly. I've included the link there as well. If folks want to go to the city website, they can look at those reports. Those are there for the current budget period as well as past years have been added to the the website too. So if somebody has an interest in looking at what data trends were for previous budget years, those are available. So a quick reminder on where our budget was back in November. We had a $309 million budget. And then I really like the graphic that the Attorney General had with the bucket. So I've modified my presentation here to add buckets, okay? So on the left-hand side, you'll see the buckets. Generally, the budget was adopted into these 4 buckets. So the first bucket being general operations, the second internal services, third capital, and the fourth surface water management. So those will be the 4 buckets that we're going to then walk through just on a quarterly report. So I'm kind of putting it in that format. So this is a reminder of the 2-year look. So again, our 2023 will be just the annual look, and then we're just looking at first quarter data for 2023. So quick explanation of the 4 buckets: general ops, internal services, surface water utility, and the capital funds. So those are our 4 general buckets. In the first bucket, we talk about operating revenues and operating expenses. So that's when we're talking about general operations, those are the terms that we're using. Second bucket, when we talk about internal services, that's your risk management insurance, that's your IT fund, that's your fleet equipment and replacement funds. So those are the internal service departments of the city that are funded internally from revenue. So the revenues in those funds are coming as interfund transfers because they're moving back and forth from the city. It's not coming from the outside. Those are also the operating expenses there are referred to as city internal service, because again, those are the types of services being provided, so those expenses are between funds. For the surface water utility, those are utility revenues, utility expenses, and then for the capital funds, you have capital revenues, which may have restrictions. So state restricts some of those capital revenues types and uses. For example, real estate excise tax, example of that. And then also the other category is the capital project expenditures. So they can only be used on certain capital activities. So if we look at general operations, so going to the first bucket for the first part of the year here, the metric that I'm going to draw your attention to is that bubble off to the right. So we're 25% of the year complete. Revenues collected are 12.8% year to date, and expenditures 16.5%. So those are what the results are showing. My note in blue kind of is a highlight of what explains that. So we're 25% of the year complete, and you'll notice in revenues that's within expectations because property tax is collected twice a year on 4/30 and 10/31 is when those are due. So if you're looking at data through March, you haven't hit your first collection point for property tax. So we would expect in April that uptick would come and you'd be on par. So no concerns. We're on target with expectations through the first quarter on both revenues and expenditures. My note on expenses here is the King County Sheriff's Office, there's a timing of when they bill, and they haven't yet billed us for the first 3 months of the year yet. So they pick up. The other note on expenses, we do have continuing vacancy rates. Okay, so that continues to happen and accrue during that full first quarter period of this year. So that's some things that we're tracking along as we go forward. So that's general operations. If I can move this along. There we go, internal service funds. So same type of analysis. The bubble shows the revenues are 37%, expenditures 29%, again, 25% of the year complete for this bucket. Notes on revenues, it's a timing of when we pay for insurance. So we pay it annually and we pay it in February. So it happens to hit, so we're gonna require the transfer for those internal funds to fund that liability insurance piece. An additional note on the IT side of things, that also fits into this bucket. There are some IT reserves that were used to fund IT system purchases. So there's a timing of that as that occurs and flows throughout the year. So that's a note on this type of fund category. So the third bucket is stormwater utilities. So utility revenues, utility expenses, again, 6.7% on revenue, 7.2% on expenses. Stormwater utility, obviously the early part of the year, you don't have the stormwater capital projects, haven't yet occurred. And so as those occur and you see them layer in, that's going to build your burn rate on expenses. For the revenue side, those are collected in line with the property tax bills. So we pay our stormwater fees that are billed with the property tax payments. So those are done in April and October. So for the first quarter, those haven't come in yet. In the capital category, this is our fourth budget, or fourth bucket, 8.7% capital revenues. So this is real estate excise taxes and impact fees are your primary restricted sources on capital. Capital expenses, this is all three categories: parks, transportation, and facilities. And so we've barely gotten started. That's what it's showing. 1.2% of those large capital investments, 36 million that are budgeted during 2023, and we've just started going on those three areas of those expenses. So as we move through the year, we're going to be back. This isn't the last of me. You'll see me again. So we'll continue to monitor and report 2023 budget and actual results, so as those occur throughout the year. And then we're coming back with a carry forward action, and then we'll also include that long-term forecast update in June as well. So just some reminders on that. And I think that's it.
Councilmember Stewart.
Aaron, you knew you weren't going to get away without me asking questions, right? Thank you for that. You know, I love this. I know we have timing issues with like the property taxes and with the payment out for the sheriff's office, but assuming that those come in as expected, do you feel like everything else is coming in relatively on track, or are there any concerning areas?
I would say for first quarter results, no concerns at the moment. I have what I would call a watch area on sales tax, and I want to keep a watch on it. It's some interesting trends developing there. We had a good year last year for sales taxes coming in, and we're seeing some softness there in purchasing activity, and then what our remittance on our local piece of sale taxes are. We're looking at that in April, so it's a 60-day delay, so that's February activity.
Okay.
So that's an area of watch for me moving forward.
Also, I saw that the REIT and impact fees are only 8.7% versus, kind of we're 25% of the way through. Is that concerning to you at all?
That is not as concerning to me for the fact that usually seasonality of when those transactions occur is typically summer months. You'll see a lot of the sale activity that would generate REIT. So for the early part of the year, it's tracking lower, but it's still fairly consistent with last year. I mean, you do have overall economic trends. Obviously, there's some concern there, so that could dampen activity for the summer, and so we'll have to continue to track that. But nothing quite yet there raising to the level of concern.
Excellent. And then you said you'll be back in June. Is that going to be to give us, I know we spoke, it feels like a long, long time ago now, about, what our long-term forecast looks like and what our options are. I mean, it's been, at least 10 years that we've been spending more than we bring in and burning down the general fund balance, which is fine, like we have it there now. But for me, with inflation the way it is, and our ability, we can only raise property taxes 1%, right? And you said, that's 56% of our revenue? So those numbers don't pencil out. I think I'm guessing that line looks worse than it did the last time we got an update on that. So will that update in June be coming to us with some options on how we kind of fix that?
Well, looks like the city manager is going to jump in on this one, but
Yeah.
So the
Thank you,
forecast.
Councilmember. Great question. I think that we are going to be coming back to you all with a little more detail about that. We may not be ready right in June, but that work is going to go on in concert. And I think what Aaron was referring to is updating the 6-year, just the straight projection look. We have to continue to do. We have a little more work to do, but we are in process of. Excuse me, that's what I get for talking all day. We are in process of coming back and revisiting that, the initial work, and then going through a little bit more of a process with the community to get to that point.
When can we expect to get that? I mean, we're going to have to do a mid-buy here. It's going to feel like in a minute, right?
Yeah,
So,
no, for sure. We will be, the plan is to get it done in time to ahead of the mid-buy.
So July, September.
We will be coming to you shortly. I had been talking with the consultant about the timeline. We'll be coming to council in 2 weeks with an update on that.
Okay.
Councilmember Howe.
Thank you. Thanks, Aaron. Very helpful. And I was wondering two things. First of all, about our police budget, which you haven't seen the bill yet, which I understand. And we just heard that the way they make up for the lack of personnel is they use overtime. Do you insight into how much overtime we're spending vis-a-vis having an individual? Does it pencil out to be the same budget? Does it mess with our number?
Does it mess with our number? Well, there's an annual reconciliation process that occurs with the King County Sheriff's Office. So it's an annualized view.
Okay.
So I don't have as real-time information as what the chief would have.
Okay.
But I see it on an annual process after the year is closed. Here's how much we paid in overtime versus how many positions we kept vacant. And so those are offsetting entries, right? So you have vacancy savings with overtime.
Yeah, because I know that it is a systemic problem across all jurisdictions with police. They have enormous difficulty hiring the kind of personnel that they want. And then he also just emphasized, trying to protect his own personnel, mental health, physical health, and it's exhausting, of course, with the overtime. So it's a one that I'm keeping my eye on. The other thing that I'd like to press in on a bit, it has to do with the softness of sales tax revenue, which I noticed in the report. Thank you for that detail, because it's very helpful to just get that early warning in. I was wondering if you're checking in with your brothers and sisters in the other jurisdictions. Are they seeing the same softness with their retail? Or is it just, are we special or not that special?
Yes. We're special and not that special both. Our unique profile is, so sales tax is not as large a revenue source for us than property tax, right? So our profile is different than other jurisdictions as well. So we experienced where there was a lot of remote sales that previously occurred, and so during the pandemic years, and those things were actually increasing for us, local sales tax rates. So that's different than other city profiles. But general economic trends, I would say, overarching trends where there's softness in sales, yes, we're seeing that across the board. Those are starting to occur. And so my first look at that was actually this April, the April numbers that I received from the state, and that's a 60-day delay, so it's actually their February transaction numbers. So that's the latest data that I have, and that's the item that I was referring to earlier where I'm watching it, because that February activity came in lower than what we've seen previous Februaries come in at, so that's what we're wanting to.
Well, I think it's a kind of a cautionary tale for us in terms of looking ahead and wherever we can bolster our own business community so that we keep business in Sammamish and derive whatever benefit we can from it, which would mean, bolstering what we can with our Chamber of Commerce or anything that we can do with our local businesses to keep them here, keep them happy, and keep them healthy is going to help us all. Last question. Do you foresee anything coming out of the legislature where could get a possible bump, like in REIT, for example? And if so, would that happen in '24 or earlier?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything on that yet. I would kind of defer to Scott if he has something more coming from the legislature. I know there was several bills that were bouncing around, but one that I was particularly watching was the property tax, 1%, 3%, and that didn't move on. So the other one would be the REIT one, but I'll go ahead and.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, Councilmember Howe. Unfortunately, those bills didn't gain a lot of traction. I think the legislature was very focused this year on some of the items that we will be coming back to talk about the impacts of around housing in particular. was a very strong focus this year. And I think our challenge continues with revenue and revenue sources and the property tax cap and REIT, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Councilmember O'Farrell? Oh, I'm sorry, I should have turned my light off. I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Councilmember Stewart had said and in support of her comments. That I would be very interested in having that discussion sooner about kind of our long-term financial sustainability. I think that's something we need to talk about soon, and I know it's on your agenda. So thank you for responding to that, Scott. Thank you. Awesome. I'm not seeing any other questions. And I know Scott and Mike and Aaron, I think Chris, everyone has a good plan going forward. At least in the next 2 weeks, we'll find out more what the rest of the year, some more meetings and things we can look forward to.
Because we don't have enough.
No, we want more.
We're going to add to it. I was looking at
all of August.
David's list of just his projects, check-in points. So, you know.
Fund all of those projects.
Yeah.
You know, those are minor details.
Yeah.
No, this isn't on just, if I could take a quick moment and highlight, I think what David put up on the screen and all those different check-in points just highlights how much we have going on. And so, we are thankful that all of you are continuing to help us get the word out on all the different process and engagement opportunities, and we continue to try to message out about those as well. So just want to continue to encourage people, if you see something you're interested in, please jump in, sign up, be a part of it, because we're really looking for resident engagement across all topics. But recognize that it has to be something you're interested in, because if not, people check out pretty quick. So lots of opportunities.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Aaron. All right. So can we take... That's what I'm doing. So we're going to just break until 8:30. I think that would be enough time for everybody. And then we'll come back to our favorite city attorney. All right. Welcome back. So next we have, I think, 2 resolutions. I'll pass it off to Carrie.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council and everyone. My name is Carrie Sand, and before you tonight, just as the Mayor said, are 2 resolutions. Both of these pertain to Public Records Act. The first is proposing to amend the city's public records policy. The main change with that is adding a new section 16. Section 16 starts on page 187 of your packet and goes to page 188. That creates a procedure for the city's public disclosure officer to obtain NISN declarations, and it gives more detail about how we're going to go about that process and when we're going to deem the efforts exhausted. We did review that change as well as some other minor changes with the Washington State Attorney General Open Government Ombuds, Morgan Damerow, who provided our training back on April 11th. Some other minor changes relate to, for example, a method for producing exemption logs. We're going to have a master key, and we're going to use codes that will refer to the statutory provisions that apply to the narrowly tailored exemptions. We're also going to allow the city to close a request within 30 days if a payment for an installment of records has not been made. And these changes will bring our Public Records Act policy in even further alignment with the state model Public Records Act rules and best practices. The second resolution before you tonight related to public records is going to restrict the use of personal devices and accounts for city business, specifically for elected officials. Recall that last October you passed something similar that amended the employee handbook. This is a counterpart to that, and it's specific to elected officials. So the overall goal of this policy is twofold: to ensure the city, of course, complies with records retention requirements for public records held on personal devices and accounts. As you all know, it's a best practice to not use your personal devices and accounts for city business. And the second goal is to respond to public records requests in a more efficient and effective manner. Both of these are before you tonight, recommended for adoption this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, got it. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, really quickly, Carrie, could you talk a little bit more about the closing of a public records request in 30 days? What was that? Could you review that again?
Sure, happy to. So that's if a requester declines or does not pay for the installment of records. Like, for example, if they want hard copies, they have to pay the per page amount.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I think we can pass both with two separate motions for...
Correct. Separate motions would be preferred. Thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Stewart?
Sure. I will make a motion that we approve, let me get the resolution number, Resolution 2023-1010 to update our public records, resolution to amend our city's public records policy.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any other discussion or thoughts, or would you want to
I
speak
just
to
want
that?
to say thank you. I think it's great that we periodically review and update these and keep them crisp. Thank you.
Great. All right, all those in favor of Resolution 2023-1010, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, next up, we have 2023-1011.
So moved. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
So moved, or I motion that we adopt Resolution R 2023-1011, a policy restricting the use of personal devices and accounts for city business.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Would you like to speak to that, Deputy Mayor?
I think it's a great policy. I think it is much needed after this past year.
All right, all those in favor of Resolution 2023-1011, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, thank you so much, Carrie. You're always shipping
actually,
us right.
Thank you, Council.
I have one last question, if I
Yeah.
could. So on the new policy restricting our use of personal devices and accounts, where if we do get something, we have to turn it in, I didn't see where we have to provide any sort of proactive declarations that we've done that. Is that something that we considered doing, to have that sort of public disclosure that all of that has been taken care of?
So I believe there's going to be a protocol established going forward where one time per month, the public disclosure officer will send an email reminder asking for any emails that or any kind of voicemails, texts, et cetera. You know, the definition of a public record is really broad. If any of those have inadvertently been sent to your private accounts or devices, which we know sometimes does happen, then you are to put them, save them in a SharePoint folder that corresponds with your name. And so then we'll have that retained consistent with the retention requirements. So that's going to be the policy going forward.
Okay, and will that also come with any sort of a, like, we sign something that says we did it?
I believe that the public disclosure officer will have communications with each one of you to make sure that it was accomplished in any given month. So there's not going to be some, declaration like the NISN declaration protocol, but I do think that this is intended to provide that monthly accountability and that monthly check-in.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate, again, these updates. I think it's awesome. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, yeah, thank you again. So next up, item 15. This has been a while. Tile repair at the Y. Anjali, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, City Council, and Mr. City Manager. I'm Anjali Maya, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Facilities. Your next topic is the Sammamish Community and Aquatic Center tile repair contract, and we have for your consideration tonight a memorandum of understanding with the city's partner, the YMCA of Greater Seattle. Council will recall that under the city's operating agreement for this facility, the YMCA is responsible for all maintenance of the building. In this case, though, the tile work has been defective from when the facility was constructed, and so the city is taking responsibility to set it right. City staff have worked closely with staff at the YMCA, and we'd like to acknowledge Nate Smith, Center Director, and Josh Sutton, Facilities Executive of the Seattle YMCA, for working with us on this. I'd also like to thank Carrie Sand, the City Attorney, for her guidance on our approach here. as well as Kevin Teague, our Deputy Director, for working meticulously on the details of the MOU. And lastly, Sevda Baran, Senior Project Manager, as well as the city's consultant, ARC Architects, for a well-thought-through design solution. With that, I'd like to hand this off to Kevin Teague, our Deputy Director, to make the presentation.
Thank you, Anjali, and thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. For the record, my name is Kevin Teague, Deputy Director for Parks, Recreation, and Facilities. And tonight we will be giving you an update on the tile replacement project at the Sammamish Community and Aquatic Center, otherwise known as the YMCA. With us tonight online is Sevda Baran, the city's project manager, and Sevda was the original, managed the original construction of the Community and Aquatic Center and has been managing the city's interest with this tile replacement issue all along. So, we have two objectives with our presentation tonight, and the first is to request authorization for the city to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the YMCA for this project. And the second is to authorize the city to reimburse the YMCA for the cost of the tile replacement. I'll begin by giving you just a quick background on the city's partnership with the YMCA. The city built and owns the facility. Construction was completed in 2016. The facility is managed by the YMCA on a 25-year lease with an option for an additional 25 years. The facility serves the communities of Sammamish and the surrounding areas of Issaquah, Redmond, Kirkland, Fall City, and Snoqualmie. Last year, there were 4,653 membership units, which is comprised of just under 12,000 individuals. According to our operation and management agreement, the YMCA is responsible for maintenance of the facility and replacement of the capital elements, and the city is responsible to maintain the parking structure, parking lot, landscape, and irrigation. I'll talk a bit now about the history of the tile failure. Deficiencies were discovered in the tile during the warranty period for the original construction of the project. In 2018, the city brought in an expert to investigate the tile assembly, and they determined that the tile failure was due to improper installation, the omission of expansion or movement joints. In 2020, the city filed a lawsuit against the contractor, and in 2022, the city received a settlement in that lawsuit for in the amount of $500,000. Also in 2022, ARC Architects were hired to study the replacement options and to develop plans for repair. As part of ARC's analysis, they determined a construction sequence to minimize the impact on the YMCA's schedule. The work will be done in two phases, allowing one of the pools to stay open all of the time. Phase 1 will work on the leisure pool, showers, and restroom, and then Phase 2 will work on the lap pool and changing rooms. Each phase will take around 3 months to complete. With the necessary pool closure to complete the tile repair, the YMCA has a large maintenance task that they would like to do at the same time, and that is to replace the pool liner for both pools. Each phase will include the tile repair and the replacement of the pool liner for that specific pool. ARC investigated multiple repair options, including tile, epoxy urethane, and polished concrete. While the pricing were very similar for each option, it was determined that replacing the failed tile with new, properly installed tile was the best repair option. It keeps a consistent aesthetic in the facility, and it has an easier long-term maintenance, and it works best with the existing sub-base thickness, particularly as that relates to the floor drains and the door thresholds. The current estimate for the tile replacement is $840,000, which is inclusive of the soft cost, design fees, and sales tax. And as a note, City Council authorized $900,000 to complete the tile repair work last October. The Memorandum of Understanding with the YMCA identifies that the tile issues are due to improper installation. Therefore, it is the city's responsibility to fix. As part of their ongoing maintenance, the YMCA needs to replace the pool liners. Because both projects require closing the pool, it is best for them to happen at the same time. The MOU spells out, I gotta catch up. The MOU spells out that the YMCA will be the lead for the project. It identifies who is responsible for what and who pays for which items, and that the YMCA will pay the general contractor and invoice the city for the tile repair work, including a 3% project management fee. That's 3% of just the tile replacement portion. The YMCA holds the construction contract and takes the primary project management role. This is because the timing and coordination will impact the YMCA's program and schedule. By leading the project, the YMCA has greater control over the pool closure timing. The YMCA is responsible for the ongoing maintenance of the facility, and then by contracting directly, the YMCA will hold the warranties for all of this work. The design and permitting phases have been completed now, and we are preparing to put the project out to bid. With the YMCA taking the lead on this on project management, they plan to begin construction in early September once school is back in session and complete the project in March of next year. So with that, I will pause and see if council has any questions.
Councilmember Howe?
Just a quick question about the tiles. It was put in place before without the expansion joints, so that created the failure. But it wasn't something that was noticeable, I guess, at the time. Is that the case?
It wasn't, it began to show up in the warranty period. And Sevda, do you want to speak to that?
Because what I'm
These
good.
These expansion joints are not seen. They are gaps between the tiles and filled with certain material, some certain grout that will allow the tile to move back and forth. That was not installed properly by the contractor.
Because that's the type of thing that might be very hard to detect going forward as well, is what
That's
it sounds
correct.
like.
Well,
How long is our warranty period?
I believe actually it will be inspected closely, and we have, though the YMCA will be managing the project, SEVDA will be our contact and will be aware of and inspecting all phases of the project, as will. We also will have ARC as for construction administration, so they are the ones that detected the problem, and they will be monitoring the installation. So it will be something that everybody is very well aware of and will make sure is done properly.
I'm sure. And just a question about the pool lining, in terms of who's so the YMCA is putting that in, so that's their responsibility because that's part of regular maintenance, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but just for a little background for everyone, because I'm not sure anyone else was here, but the company that installed the tile, they went bankrupt. And so that's why this is kind of happening. It was detected during the warranty period, and had they not gone bankrupt, then they would have repaired it and this wouldn't be as big of a deal. So thank you to everyone involved, because I think that the outcome that we got was actually a little bit better than we might have originally thought, given the circumstances of the company going bankrupt. So thank you.
Yes, SEVDA will be out there with magnifying glass, I'm sure. Yeah. All righty. So Scott?
Thank you, Mayor. Just really quickly, I want to thank the team for working with the YMCA, but I also want to thank the YMCA for being a good partner in this. And when presented with an alternative to how to approach this project, took that on and were willing to take it on and be sort of the project lead. So I do think this is a great example of partnership that we have in place. And I really want to thank the team for working with them and finding a solution that works for everybody, but is actually a better outcome all the way around.
All right, would anyone like to make this motion? Councilmember O'Farrell? I think you would.
I'd love to. I move to authorize the city manager to sign the memorandum of understanding with the YMCA of Greater Seattle for the tile replacement project at the Sammamish Community and Aquatic Centre, and to authorize the city to reimburse the YMCA in accordance with the terms of said memorandum of understanding.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Would you like to speak to that?
I support this.
Awesome. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right, thank you. And you are next up, Eastlake High School.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And actually, with this one, I'm going to hand it off directly to Kevin Teague, to introduce the presentation.
1 second, just changing presentations here. Sorry for the long pause there. So thank you, Anjali and council. And again, for the record, my name is Kevin Teague, Deputy Director for Parks, Recreation, and Facilities. And this next project is the replacement of the synthetic turf at Eastlake High School Community Field number 3. This proposed project meets the tenets of our existing interlocal agreement with the Lake Washington School District and is a great example of our cooperative relationship with them that enables the greater community access to these top-notch athletic facilities. So with us tonight is our park planner, Becky Smith, and Becky has done an excellent job in managing this project from the very beginning and getting it to this point where we are ready to move forward with the turf replacement. So with that, I will turn it over to Becky.
Thanks, Kevin, for the introduction. Just confirming, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes? Great. So good evening, City Council. Like Kevin mentioned, my name is Becky Smith, and I'm the park planner with the Parks, Recreation, and Facilities Department. And tonight, I'll be presenting on the Eastlake High School baseball field and multipurpose field turf replacement project. So for this presentation, I'll first walk through the background of the community fields at Eastlake. Then I'll go into more detail on field number 3, including the original turf conversion project, as well as the 2023 turf replacement project. Then we'll discuss some important new changes with the Lake Washington School District that will impact field usage, as well as our plans moving forward. And then I'll conclude the presentation with a project timeline, next steps, and requested direction from City Council. So to begin, we'll jump into the background of the community fields at Eastlake. Here is a vicinity map that shows the Upper Sammamish Commons, which is outlined here in purple. And this is shown in relation to Eastlake High School community fields, which are outlined to the northeast in red. And zooming into the community fields, you'll see the 3 fields that the city schedules. All 3 fields accommodate, are multi-use and accommodate baseball, softball, soccer, lacrosse, and football. And that being said, you can see from this image that the primary use for fields 1 and 2 is soccer and lacrosse, while the primary use for field 3 is baseball and softball. And again, the focus of tonight's presentation is on field 3. So next, I will walk you through the history of the community sports fields at Eastlake. It started in 2004 when the City of Sammamish and Lake Washington School District entered into an interlocal agreement, also known as an ILA. This agreement allowed for joint use of the Eastlake High School facilities. The city agreed to pay most of the costs to improve fields 1 and 2 in exchange for community use of the district's facilities. So that means we have access to the land, their parking, and their infrastructure. Both the city and the district share maintenance costs in proportion to their respective use, and all of the revenue is retained by the city. And at the time of this ILA, fields 1 and 2 were not the fields that you see today, but instead were an underutilized 3-acre grass practice field. And in 2006, in partnership with the district, the city converted that practice field into the 2 multi-use synthetic turf fields that you see today. After that, a citywide ball field analysis in 2008 recommended that field number 3, which at the time was natural grass, be considered for redevelopment with artificial turf and lights. This study ranked this baseball field as the highest among all of the field projects to be reconsidered for redevelopment within the city of Sammamish. And then following this study, the ILA was amended to include the renovation of Field 3 to synthetic turf with lights. And then in 2012, Field 3 was converted to multi-use with synthetic turf. And then in 2016, after 10 years of use on Fields 1 and 2, the synthetic turf was replaced. And just to note, 10 years is the typical lifespan of a synthetic turf field. So now I'll go into more detail on field number 3. When the city entered into the ILA with the district, Field 3 was natural grass, as I mentioned, which is shown here on the left. And in 2012, the renovation converted this field to multi-use with synthetic turf, which is shown on the right. And here you can see the lining for lacrosse and soccer in the outfield. And the field now accommodates a range of sports for adults, youth, and Eastlake High School students. D.A. Hogan and Associates, Inc. was the prime consultant for this turf conversion project. And as I mentioned previously, the 10 years is the typical lifespan for a synthetic turf field. And since Field 3 is in its 11th year of use, the city has been anticipating for several years that the turf replacement will occur soon, just as was done for Fields 1 and 2 back in 2016. So in order to evaluate the performance of the turf, the city has completed some GMAX testing, which essentially measures the shock attenuation of the field surface in order to evaluate playability and safety of that field. The testing in 2021 showed that there was some wear on the field, which was expected, but the field was generally performing within acceptable levels. Testing in early 2022 showed significant wear and unacceptable levels at the high use areas of the baseball infield, which include home plate, first base, and third base. So in an effort to improve the playability and the longevity of the field in 2022, the city installed some small patches in these high use areas and groomed the entire field. And so this year in 2023, it was determined that the field is due for replacement. And here on the right, you can see the layers that make up a synthetic turf field. When the turf replacement project takes place, we'll be replacing the turf, the infill, the drainage rock, and portions of the perimeter fencing and netting. A supplemental pad system will also be added. Infill for this project includes a coated SBR. So those are crumb rubber granules that are entirely encapsulated with an acrylic coating. And this infill is consistent with the materials that are used on Eastlake Fields 1 and 2, and also on the Skyline Community Sports Field turf replacement project that was completed back in 2017. D.A. Hogan was selected to oversee this turf replacement project due to their familiarity with the site and because they served as the prime consultant on the initial sports field development project. And as a reminder, at the meeting on February 7th in 2023, the City Council authorized the city manager to execute a cooperative purchasing participation agreement with Sourcewell. Sourcewell is a purchasing co-op that procures competitive bids for the goods and services in accordance with Washington state procurement laws. They make their competitive bids available to public agencies like the City of Sammamish who want to procure goods and services for the prices and terms set forth in the contracts between Sourcewell and their various vendors. So this process of utilizing a purchasing co-op is commonly referred to as piggybacking. So for this project, the city will be piggybacking off of Sourcewell's contract with AstroTurf. And the reason behind this is that the district has requested that the city use their standard synthetic turf product, which is AstroTurf. And synthetic turf installation is unique in that there's typically only one contractor per turf product that's authorized and endorsed to install that specific turf product. So if the city were to follow typical bid solicitation procedures instead of procuring through a purchasing cooperative like Sourcewell, there's no guarantee that AstroTurf would be the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. So therefore, the city will be utilizing Sourcewell's agreement between Sourcewell and AstroTurf. And AstroTurf's local installer is Coast to Coast Turf, and they submitted a bid for this work. So here is an overview of the bid schedule for this project. The base bid includes site preparation, installation of the synthetic turf system, and modifications to the fencing and netting systems. Alternate 1 includes the installation of a synthetic turf logo behind home plate. And this logo is standard for the district. And for this field will consist of a white E for Eastlake behind home plate. And this alternate is separated out from the base bid because it will be paid for by Lake Washington School District. And alternate 2 includes the installation of a synthetic turf logo in the center field. This option was discussed back and forth between the district and the city, and the district ultimately recommended that we do not proceed with this alternate because it deviates from their standard. And then alternate 3 includes an elastic layer padding system instead of a Brock padding system. So a supplemental pad is the cushioning layer that can help prevent compaction of synthetic turf systems over time, as well as help reduce the risk of concussions and other injuries for the players. An elastic layer pad system consists of poured-in-place rubber, while a Brock padding system consists of interlocking expanded polypropylene panels. The difference between those two. And here is a breakdown of the costs for the turf replacement. The first chart shows the base bid and all 3 alternates with Washington state sales tax included. This totals approximately $1.4 million. And then below you can see the city staff recommendation. So staff are recommending that City Council award alternates 1 and 2, but not award alternate 3. And as I mentioned, alternate 1 is consistent with the district standard of including a logo behind home plate. And then alternate 3 includes the installation of that E-layer padding system rather than the Brock. Both E-layer and Brock do perform similarly, and they're both viable options for the field. And both systems can be reused during the next turf replacement cycle in approximately 10 years. The Brock padding system has potential to degrade under UV exposure. So during that 10-year replacement, it will need to be removed, protected, and reinstalled, whereas the E-layer system does not. So the costs of the labor from removing and reinstalling the Brock would exceed the costs of the upfront costs of the E-layer padding system. So spending a little bit more money now, but saving money in the long run, essentially. And then lastly, staff recommend not awarding alternate 2 because it deviates from the Lake Washington standard, and Lake Washington is in support of not awarding this alternate. So you can see that the second chart shows the staff's recommendation and includes everything except alternate 2, which is the center field logo, and also includes a 10% construction contingency. And that totals approximately $1.5 million. And then the chart here shows the total estimated project costs, which are inclusive of the staff recommended total that was from the previous slide, as well as design costs. So this total project cost would be approximately $1.55 million. And that total is under our park CIP budgeted amount of $1.68 million. So now I'd like to discuss the recent changes with Lake Washington School District. This past March, the district approved an adjustment to their school hours. Eastlake High School will now start and end 1 hour later than previous years, and that will result in a 30-minute shift in field availability for the city. So this 30-minute loss will apply to all 3 fields and will result in a 90-hour loss per field per year. So that's a total of 270 hours per year for all 3 fields. And the city is actively working with the district to amend our current ILA to reflect these changes and identify ways that we can mitigate the loss in hours here. On to next steps. So for this Eastlake Field 3 turf replacement project, design documents have been completed and we're ready to move forward with the construction contract with Coast to Coast Turf. We plan to begin construction at the beginning of June, which will ensure enough time to complete construction before school starts back up in September. And in the meantime, as I mentioned, the city will begin working with the district to amend the existing ILA to reflect the change in usage due to the new school hours. And before we move forward with our direction from council, I'd like to open up the floor to any questions that council has regarding the project.
Councilmember Trine.
Thank you for the presentation, and get right to my question. What's the estimated loss of revenue from the change of time?
There's, as Becky talked about, there is, we're in ongoing discussions with the school district on ways to make up that 270 hours. And there are opportunities with other facilities at the high school that we're discussing with them that would more than make up for the loss in time. It does have a significant impact in that the loss of time is early in the day, and that is typically when we are using the fields the most. There's more to come on that with addendum number 5, which will be the next. We're working on addendum number 4, which is Inglewood Middle School, and then addendum number 5 will be this change to hours, and we're looking for ways to make up that time, whether it's by using other facilities or getting additional hours in the summertime or other times of the year.
All right, and a follow on a different subject matter is the infill. What's the material that's being used now as infill?
It's currently the coated. It's the same material. It's the coated SBR rubber that's encapsulated.
Okay, it's not the best, but that's what they want to use.
Yeah, that's the Lake Washington School District standard. We are, just for council's information, we are looking at using a different product at Inglewood for other reasons. And when we give you that presentation, we'll talk more about that. That will be a cork product.
And why wouldn't we use that on this product?
Well, that's a great question, because you have 3 fields that are being maintained in that same area, and having different materials would be difficult for the grooming and top dressing and that sort of thing. So, and it is what the district what they're used to and what they've asked for.
So it's a different machine that grooms.
I don't know that it's a different
versus the rubber
machine, but you're often adding additional materials. So
right.
Storing materials on site would be the issue, probably more than the groomer.
All right, thanks, Kevin.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah. along those lines, so which material is more environmentally friendly? Because I appreciate that it might be a little bit more work, but if the impact to the environment is less, that feels like long-term that's going to be a much better option.
I can tell you what the materials are. I don't have data on which is more environmentally friendly. I mean, obviously cork is a natural product, so that doesn't have the same issues that a coated rubber would have. If you would like, if council would like, we can come back with additional information on the different materials, and we'll need to talk about that with Inglewood as well.
Yeah, I think that's a worthwhile discussion to have. I think Councilmember Treen raises a good point there. So if we could, I think that would be really important. My other question is, don't those fields have lights?
They do.
They do. So in terms of like the hours, is there any tweaking we can do on the other end? Because I would imagine that the revenues we get are going to be from the leagues, right? The little leagues and the little soccer leagues. So they have to start a half an hour later, but they're not, I mean, as long as they can get their, 3 hours for their games in, or their, 2 practices, in evening, we should be able to handle that. So do we really think we're going to lose that revenue? Do they always go up until the last possible minute in terms of how late the lights can stay on?
They don't typically go up to the last possible minute. Probably the least rented times are the 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock hour. And so what we do see is that we're not maximizing the use of the fields as it is, just because you have periods of time like spring break, you have space of time between different sports when one season ends and another begins. And then you have the less desirable times of late in the evening. We also at Eastlake, there is a requirement in the ILA that says Sunday nights the lights will be shut off at 7 p.m. And so that is unique to the Eastlake facility.
But the school time won't affect that because that's a Sunday, so that won't be affected. Okay, so it'll be interesting to see. We may not actually have much revenue loss. Just the kids will have to practice a half an hour later potentially. So okay, thanks. Appreciate that. Great presentation.
Deputy Mayor Lamb.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Going back to the materials question, Council Member Stewart talked about sustainability. I was interested in the heat aspect of it, that I know that turf is inherently hotter, but are there ways to bring down the heat, understanding that this turf is supposed to last for 10 years and temperatures are just getting hotter? So I was just doing a little bit of reading on that, and it mentioned the color of the grass could be lighter as an example to bring down temps, or using sand as infill. I don't know anything about, turf installation, but those are the two things they mentioned. And I don't know if the manufacturer, is it AstroTurf, has any other options nowadays, especially when there's so many fields all across the country that are probably dealing with some of the same issues that we are, that areas of the country is just getting hotter.
We don't have irrigation. So in states that have higher temperatures in summer, you actually have some minimal irrigation to actually water down the turf fields. I don't believe we do that as standard practice in Washington, and it's something, if temperatures continue to rise, that I'm sure design consultants would recommend we do it. But as of now, we don't have that in our design.
What about material choices, like lighter grass or infill that I just mentioned?
Yeah, we can ask our consultant on that. If they, I know that they do extensive work in California as well as in Washington, and so I'm sure it's an issue in other places as well. So you're saying to reduce the heat island effect by changing potentially the color of the turf, or would a natural material, say a cork or sand, would that reduce the amount of heat that's generated or captured by the turf?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Howe?
And since you're going to ask your consultant a bunch of questions anyway, mine has to do with the duration of the turf. Everywhere it just says 500 playing hours, 8 to 12 years at maximum. Is there, if you could ask the consultant, is there anything coming in the future where we can look at seeing longer duration for these types of products? So I'm not looking for the answer today, but since you're already talking to your consultant, if you could just piggyback that on, that'd be great. Thanks.
You bet. But one thing I can say, and that we are doing very proactively on this project, is adding that E-layer, as Becky described it. That definitely increases the lifespan of the turf. Whereas the lifespan might be 8 to 10 years. This is more likely to be in the 10 years plus. So, and we'll continue. But we'll ask that question and see if there's anything else that could be done.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Trine?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for a second dip at this. Because help me out, because I think in the presentation it was, because I'm looking at the material again and thinking out loud here a little bit, is the other 2 fields would be replaced in 5 more years? I don't remember exact dates, but I'm just wondering when you're doing your analysis and talking with the consultant, it's kind of like, well, if you're going to replace that field, when do you ever marry them up, is what I'm thinking. How do we make it so that it marries up? So if you say, okay, that one's going to last 5 more years, but I'm going to go 12 with this one, then that one's going to get a 12. See, they'll never come together then. So at what point do we make it so that they can come together and you can actually make it so it's maintenance easy? Because I get that. That's a cost too. So anyway, just a thought. Just thanks. Sorry for taking up a little more time.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, what I understand you're saying is when will we be replacing all 3 of them at the same time? And at this point, we changed fields 1 and 2 in 2016. So 2026 we'd be looking at replacement there. So that would be the next step.
So you kind of get what I'm headed there, Kevin. If you only took 2 years of having 2 different materials because you got a better material on the new replacement, because you're going to replace that other field too, and it's like I want the upgrade there too. I mean, I would think a council would say that's a good move. Put the better material down, get the more environmentally sensitive material on the ground, and it's safer. So, I don't know. It seems like a win-win.
In terms of field, I know where you're coming from, Councilmember Trine, as into match products, but in terms of field usage, like for one summer, we'd lose the complete use of one of the fields, so there's actually an advantage to stagger in terms of the ability to use the field, and then we'll have to talk to the district because they also have the football field, and that's something the city doesn't maintain. So we'll have to see what materials they use there as well.
Councilmember O'Farrell? I don't expect an answer to this, but it was just something I was thinking of when I was looking at the drawing of field number 3, and that already has AstroTurf on it, and obviously they'll be removing that to put the new one on. When these things go out for bid and you're talking to a contractor, do they give details about what happens to the old material, how that's disposed of? Do they have like an environmental regulations as how they're going to dispose of all this plastic? I'm assuming it's all variations on plastic, where that gets disposed of, or does it just go into a landfill? Do we have any? Because I always think of that when I see reconstruction and remodeling of anything. I always think of all the old stuff that's coming out that we're just going to like chuck away and we're going to put brand new things in. Like, what happens to all that old stuff and where does it go, or does it just go into a jolly great big landfill?
Yeah, Council, you have great questions, and I do wish we had a consultant here. I recall from Skyline High School that the contractor managed to sell the turf to someone else who was able to use it. Like, if there's somebody out there who, cannot afford a new turf field, they are able to put it to some use. So in that, it is sustainable, but then that's just the turf. I can't speak for if the infill is in, in good quality and can be reused as well.
Councilmember Howe, did you have? Oh, no, you're good. So it sounds like this one's coming back at some point.
So Council, we'll be honest here, there is a very tight timeline in the summer that a field has to be built. If not, it's not ready in August. So we have brought this to you in the way of the purchasing co-op earlier and as well as when we had the design contract. So I'm going to ask the team to be honest. If we checked with the school district and came back, the earliest would be May 16th. Is that something we could make work and still get the field constructed in summer? The longest lead time is to order the turf.
Becky, can you speak to that?
I don't know that the consultant or the contractor would be available because they're pretty booked out for construction of other turf fields, to my understanding. If we started later.
Is it starting the construction later or just getting these questions answered?
The turf lead time is 30 days. We're planning on starting construction on June 1st. So their plan was to order turf at contract authorization. So as soon as possible.
Got it.
I have a proposal, Mayor.
Yeah, Council, what do you think? I mean, the only thing that stuck with me is the E-layer for sure, just because I heard concussion. Yeah, I don't know I know we've talked about turf so many different times, so I don't really know if there is a righter or better answer. Yeah, go ahead, Anjali.
So we have a suggestion. If council is comfortable authorizing the contract tonight, we would do that. And then we'd speak to the Lake Washington School District, and if they are comfortable with the change in product, then we would do that as a change order with the contractor. Because it's just the infill material. That way the turf can be ordered, we can stay on schedule.
We wouldn't be able to look at what Deputy Mayor Lamb suggested about the different turf coloring to reduce heating, but we could look at that, hearing that concern, we can look at that for Englewood. We have time on that project, but on this one, we could definitely see if the district would be amenable to a different infill product.
Councilmember Indapure?
Yeah, I think, my question is, have other districts or other, Parks Department, have they used this cork or sand as an alternative in Washington State? So what I'm trying to understand is, I think the questions have been great, right? I think that's our goal, is to move the needle so that we are more sustainable, so that we are more environmentally conscious. But, have others done it, and have we seen the real benefits of it already? I just was trying to see if it's even feasible for us to keep pushing this project. And then my other question was going to be, if in case we approve it tonight, and then if there are any changes that we're making, for example, the color or even the infill product, does it impact the cost of the contract?
A change would impact the cost of the project. I don't know how much, and I don't think that the difference between cork or the coated SBR rubber, I don't think that will be that significant of a cost change. And to your question about is cork or sand being used in this area, cork is being widely used now. It has become fairly prevalent. I don't know about sand or how that works, but I know that cork is being used, particularly like in the city of Seattle. They've gone to, I believe, only cork on their fields.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, so I'm thinking we picked cork for Inglewood, right? And we did that probably for all really great reasons. You said you were going to go check with the district. With our existing agreement with the district, do they get to pick the material, or is that our choice? We're paying for it.
Well, it is an agreement and a cooperative agreement, and so we have been deferring that to them because it is because of the primary user. However, I think that we certainly have every grounds to ask the question.
Because I'd kind of be more inclined that we approve this project with Cork and give you the leeway that if for some reason we can't make that work, that we can revert back to the other material. Because I'm assuming, and I know we didn't get a definitive answer, but that the Cork is in fact more environmentally friendly, right? And that's one of the reasons why we picked it for Inglewood.
Yeah.
Cork is not?
I think, yeah, I mean, this is just the infill product, though. So, like Anjali, like you were saying, we can approve this MOU or whatever this. What is
We
this?
also have to approve the contract as well for all of it.
But in the contract, it says, what should we do? Anjali, help me here.
Again, if council is comfortable, you would authorize the construction contract tonight because it's also tied to a dollar amount, and then direct staff to work with the district to look at cork or other natural materials, infill only, right, as an alternate.
Yep.
And that would be through a change order. So what we would do is we would find out if the district, if they can make the logistics work, right, the maintenance and to Councilmember Treen's point, at some point the other two fields will also be replaced and then we could match whatever this product is. So we would first do that, we'd also get a cost on it, and then we'd come back to get a change order authorized.
And I think it depends too, right? It has to be more sustainable and it has to be safe, right? I mean, in terms of the impacts to the students, right? We don't want to necessarily trade sustainability for injuries to children. That's not a good trade-off, so.
Right.
Yeah, so I am good with the staff recommendation with the caveat of what Anjali said. Scott, go ahead.
No, I was just going to, thank you, Mayor. I was just going to say that I think that the critical path is the ordering of the turf itself. And I think this allows us to explore the opportunity to use the different material. And I think we should be able to find that piece out relatively soon, well before we would get to any sort of turf installation, if that's helpful.
No, that sounds good. Would anyone like to make the motion to approve the staff recommendation? And then, I don't know, Anjali, when you could come back to us, but we'll figure that out.
I can do that. I move that we approve the, is it both the contract and the MOU together? Or are they separate? Oh, there we go. Thank you. I move that we authorize the city manager to execute a construction contract and a 10% contingency for the East Lake High School baseball field, multipurpose field turf replacement project in an amount not to exceed $1.512977.77 million, with the caveat that you will research if the infill, if there's a more sustainable and equally safe option, and come back with a change order.
I'll second that.
All right, sounds good. Would you like to speak to that, Councilmember Stewart?
I think I said a mouthful already. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for being patient. I know. All right, so all those in favor of that motion that was just made, say aye.
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 Opposed? All righty. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Becky. All right, last item, or at least for new business, Audrey, I think, is coming on for Stormwater Engineering Services contract with Osborne Consulting.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council. I am Interim Public Works Director Audrey Starcy, and with me this evening is our Senior Stormwater Program Manager Stephanie Sullivan. We are excited to walk you through our recent RFQ process for obtaining a contract for stormwater engineering services. So bear with me here while I share my screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. So we will spend a few minutes this evening just to, sorry about that, just to go over our general process through that we go through for architecture and engineering, or A&E contracts, as well as what we go through during our procurement and purchasing policy. It's actually highlighted in the very recently adopted purchasing manual that Council adopted on April 18th. But we'll go through our on-call A&E contracts and what that process looks like as well. And we'll finish up with a focus on our on-call based contracts in Public Works, and of course with some focus in the end of our stormwater engineering services contract, which we will be asking Council to approve this evening. There's a lot of information on this slide. I'll try to kind of go through it fairly quickly. I did just want to point out some highlights and some differences for both a traditional architecture and engineering, or A&E contract. So that's shown in the column on the right. The main difference between a traditional contract and an on-call contract is the scope of work, or the quantity and frequency of that scope of work. So they are both qualification-based contracts. They're based on RCW 3980. But the main difference, like I said, is that quantity and schedule. So with a traditional contract, we often see those for our basin plans, our designs for our major projects. Those have a very definite scope, a definite quantity, and a very definite frequency. So we know exactly when that plan, that design work will be starting and ending. Our on-call contracts have a very indefinite quantity and an indefinite frequency in which we may be using them. So we have a variety of contracts in Public Works that utilize this. You can see a handful of examples down at the bottom. Development Review, that team uses these types of contracts often. We also have general civil engineering support, traffic engineering, and stormwater engineering. Our on-call contracts, which are the focus for this evening, that process, as we go through and select consultants, is an RFQ, a request for qualifications process. We ask consultant teams to submit statements of qualifications, or SOQs. Typically, our traditional A&E contracts, by contrast, are typically solicited through a request for proposal, or an RFP, and the consultant would submit an RFP. Occasionally, with those A&E contracts, some agencies do go out for an RFQ with an RFP added into that process. So I just wanted to clarify a little bit of information there. And the biggest difference that you'll see on the staff end is how those contracts are implemented through our work and how they are built. So those on-call contracts can be spread across multiple divisions within a department, and you'll even see those spread across different departments within the city. Each type of work within that on-call contract is implemented through a task order, and each task order has its own scope and schedule and budget. The billing rates are defined with the on-call contract itself, but like I said, the work itself is implemented through that task order. Whereas a traditional A&E contract may have 1 to 2 budget account numbers, but traditionally they'll have just one lengthy schedule typically for some of our bigger design contracts, but typically one person will be managing that entire contract from start to end. And I kind of went over expenditures and billing, but like I said, some of those on-call contracts can be utilized by different departments and divisions, so they'll have different BARS numbers attached to them. We also wanted to spend a few minutes this evening highlighting the time it takes to put together an RFP or RFQ. There's typically 4 major steps that we go through. As you can see, all of those steps have a lot of components to them. We tried to identify how many hours we end up spending with each step. You can see that There's quite a bit of staff hours that we spend going through the RFP or RFQ development, the advertisement phase, the consultant selection, and the consultant award. I did meet with our teams, and I would say that these hours are actually on the lower end of things. I also wanted to highlight on this slide how many teams that we work with internally to prepare an RFQ. So we work with our grants and contracts unit, we work with legal, and we work with our city clerk's office to get an advertisement out the door. Taking a minute to focus on the stormwater contracts, the enhanced level of service that council adopted last fall has a very, it has an enhanced level of service. We have a lot of operational programs and a really well-balanced capital project and program list. We are very excited to deliver on those projects and programs, but the best way for us to deliver on some of those programs is through an on-call contract. We did identify on to the right, kind of the more turquoise colors, that we will be utilizing separate RFPs for different types of contracts. Again, that's kind of our bigger projects that have a very definitive scope of work. The RFP, excuse me, the RFQ process that we just went through to identify this on-call contract before you this evening will be implemented through 2 consultant on-call contracts. One is before you this evening, and both of those contracts will have numerous task orders to support all of the different operational projects and programs, as well as our capital projects and programs. And finally, we did want to take a few minutes to highlight the benefits of an on-call contract. So it really reduces staff time, it reduces consultant time, and those hours build back to the city. We're able to bundle administrative costs and project management costs. It really helps having a consultant on board. They retain that knowledge over time. It reduces the amount of site visits, and we can streamline many meetings, documents for design projects. They get to know our front-end documents and our specs. And we're able to really have that on-call resource for unplanned engineering work in the stormwater world. That's very important. And again, it really just fosters efficiency and flexibility for our programs. Our stormwater capital program was really intended and built to have that flexibility in mind. And finally, just wanted to highlight the steps that we've gone through with this particular contract. The stormwater team has spent a lot of hours putting together this contract before you this evening, and we're finally at the last phase, seeking your authorization this evening. And with that, I'll stop sharing. If you have any questions about the process itself or the contract before you, happy to answer those, and then I can put the motion back up on the screen. Excuse me, I've been talking all day, so just 1 second.
Thank you so much. All right, Council, do you have any questions? Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, really quickly. I know we have a new process, a new set of purchasing guidelines. So are there any, like, one, thank you for that presentation. I love that we go through that kind of process. I know it takes you guys some time, but for these big dollar contracts, I think it's worth the effort. Do we have any disclosures about any of the, are there any conflicts of interest or any relationships? Because I know that's kind of new to the procurement process that we just added that probably came midstream for this particular process.
None that I'm aware of. I don't know if Audrey's aware of any, but no, not for Osborne Consulting.
Awesome. Okay. And I want to give a shout out to Stephanie for being so enthusiastic about Public Works Week. She's got that background. That's very exciting. All right. Thanks. Thanks, Audrey and team. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Council, you have any other questions? Can we see that motion?
Sure.
I want to let Councilmember Howe take this one.
But only if she can read it. I move to authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Osborne Consulting, Inc. in substantially the form of Exhibit 1 to commence work to support stormwater projects and programs through the on-call stormwater engineering services contract.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Thank you, Audrey and Stephanie.
Thank you, Council. Have a good evening.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. All right, council reports. So, Councilmember O'Farrell, I think you had one.
Yes, thank you. I attended the Kokanee Work Group meeting there on Wednesday, and just a couple of kind of big picture items on there. And it was something that was discussed at the April meeting and then back in January. Very concerned about the number of kokanee returning to spawn. In 2022, they had 81 spawners return, which is a much more reduced number than they had previously. So 2023, they're really not sure what we're going to discover. So it's kind of, we're at a situation now where there's a sense of urgency about saving the kokanee salmon. And as you know, these are a lake-based salmon. They don't move further out into the ocean. So it's very much in our back door. They were looking at 3 various creeks. So Ebright and Laughing Jacobs Creek seems to be doing much better in terms of population. They're seeing it's Lewis Creek that's causing quite some concern. They are updating, Jim Barry gave a presentation, they're updating the Kokanee survey document, is the document that they use when they go out to look for grant proposals. So they're starting to update that now soon and looking for input on that. The second thing they talked about was on May 18th, there is a Kokanee Education Day, which will be spearheaded by Trout Unlimited, and they were looking for Kokanee Work Group members to volunteer. The third thing is there's a grant opportunity called America the Beautiful Challenge. It's a grants given out throughout the United States for restoration projects. It's given through the Fish and Wildlife, Department of Interior, Defense and Agriculture are part of that group. And it's going to be spearheaded by the Snoqualmie tribe in our area. They're looking for a grant proposal of about $700,000. So they may be coming back looking to members for letters of support for this proposal. So we may be seeing that coming soon. And then lastly, our next meeting is in July. It's going to be in person and outdoors, Kent. So that will be fun. I think it'll be the first in person we may have since the pandemic. So, and that's it.
Councilmember Dreen.
Thank you, Roisin. Thank you, Mayor. And then to follow up on that Kokanee Work Group to our next meeting, we will be discussing the budget and passing a draft for that. I think we should well, I would say it's a good vote in support in that the city of Sammamish gets a lot of the major projects. So though we do spend the most out of the groups that are in there, we also receive the benefit that most of the projects right now are being done right here in the city. Just so everybody knows, just to remind yourselves that the Puget Sound Region Council's General Assembly is May 30th. I would like to go. That's a Tuesday, May 30th. So if anyone else is planning on attending, we should make sure people have a heads up on who's going. And then May 4th, there is that's in 2 days. There's a lunch discussion with the Sound Cities Association on the Blake decision. So I'll be attending that to listen and learn what our neighboring committees are doing in regards to enacting their own drug possession and drug use ordinances based on what legislators have done. And then Councilmember Howe and I will be at ETP. That'll be next Friday, but just want to give you guys a heads up on some of the things that are on our calendars moving forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I sent you guys an email. The GMPB is meeting this week. We do have a vote on Kirkland if anybody has any questions or concerns about that. And then in terms of the Blake decision, I was at an event on Saturday and I had the opportunity to speak with County Council Member Claudia Balducci and some other city council members from a variety of cities. A number of our neighboring cities are already working on legislation. There is a strong desire across the various jurisdictions that if in fact we do have to take action, that we try to be coordinated, because it really doesn't work if every municipality has a patchwork of laws. I There was also a state senator there. There's a 99% chance that there will be a special session, and they are very optimistic that they will resolve this, but definitely think we should all have a plan B because, you know, there are no guarantees in life. So I do think we need to, maybe as a group, or, you know, in conjunction with the city manager, figure out how we want to do that level of coordination so that we aren't creating a patchwork of laws that will make it nearly impossible for our law enforcement agencies to figure out who can do, and our communities, right, just in general, who can do what, where. So I don't know if that's something we can take offline, but I think we need to do that, and we probably need to move pretty quickly, because if the state legislature doesn't do it, all of this happens on July 1, which is kind of like tomorrow in government speak, right? So, yeah, thank you.
All right, any other council members? Deputy Mayor Lamb?
I just had one more. Last week, council members Howe and Stewart and I met with Sammamish Plateau Water. It was an hour conversation, just updating us on the North Diversion, PFAS, and how our single-family homes are charged, and the rate models in general that they use.
Great, thank you. Scott, did you have anything?
Not tonight, Mayor, thank you.
All good. All right. Anyone else? Who's doing it? But your mic's not on. Yeah.
I still move to adjourn.
Yeah, okay. All right, second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, good evening, everybody.
Good night, Ratuja.
Take care. See ya.